Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, the weekly place to hear the latest on the movies, TV, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, the Roz and Mocha of this podcast, it's Amanda the Jedi and Chase Azarian. Thank you both for coming back on the pod to talk TIFF. Chase, you're finally... You've done it. You've completed a Toronto International Film Festival. How's it feel?
I've done it. It's been a huge bucket list item for me for years. I've always wanted to go. The only film festival I've been to in person is Sundance, which I absolutely love Sundance. And I know film festivals are expensive, so I was lucky enough to get a press pass for the first time ever, which saved me a ton of money. So thank you again, TIFF people for that. But yeah, for anybody that's considering picking any film festival, these guys know a lot more than me. They've been to a lot more, but I will say, even though I love Sundance to death, I do think I'm ready to say I prefer the Toronto International Film Festival. Just the way they set it up, the way I love going to Sundance and discovering movies, but there's so many movies going into this festival that already have some Oscar hype going in, or just random movies like Piece by Piece, the Pharrell Williams Lego movie biopic or documentary I found out while I was there. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that plays. They got a type of movie for everybody. Everything's compact. It's easy to get around, and it's just super high energy all year. You know, I didn't really know many people going to TIFF besides these two and Caitlin right here, and ended up meeting a ton of great people out there. It's definitely something. I understand it's expensive, but find a couple of roommates, find a place in Toronto, walk 30 minutes like I did, go to the sketchy Airbnb and have a great time, because I had an absolute blast. And yeah, just super excited to talk about all the great movies we got to see. So
yeah, it was a big return to form in a lot of ways. I think what you're talking about in terms of the lineup is just the TIFF usually is able to deliver like solid entertainment and also like a variety of like really high quality films as well. Whereas in a Sundance or something like that, I feel like it's a lot more about discovery. There's so many established filmmakers and big movie stars and movies that are also like bound to be released a few months from now and stuff like that, like whether it is the sneak peeks we get of stuff like Piece by Piece or Heretic, or it is the pending Oscar movies like Anora, even the Brutalist. There's a pretty good guarantee that you're going to see some pretty notable films, and I think there was a lot that really stood out to us this year. Amanda, we've had a little more time since our big TIFF recap. When you're looking across the slate for movies from this year's TIFF, did you find that it was more of the prestige-y kind of artsy stuff that spoke to you, or kind of just straight up entertainment, whether it's the scary stuff or the funny movies? What really stood out the most in terms of the offerings from Toronto?
I think it was a mix of both, to be completely honest. Like, we had what I would consider to be the combined outings of that, with things like Anora and The Substance that are like definitely tackling some deeper things, but then are also just really fun movies to watch. Then you do have the more goofy stuff like Friendship, and then you have like the more artsy, I would say less accessible things like Brutalist, that all kind of made their mark, hit an itch. There's a lot of really good foreign movies this year too, with things like Dead Talent Society and the Gesuidouz. I think it was like a pretty strong year across the board for kind of expected Oscar stuff and stuff that's just fun. Just not the best TIFF I've ever had, because 2019 exists, but a pretty solid one overall.
Definitely, yeah. Kyle in the live stream saying that their favorite film from TIFF was The Brutalist for sure. They also thought that Life of Chuck, Emilia Perez, and Flo really struck a chord. We'll be talking about just about all of those films as we get into our favorite films from the festival. But shout out to Kyle, and shout out to all the other Intercuties who caught us during the festival and said hi, whether that's Kyle or Antonio, who I know caught Amanda. I didn't get to see at the festival. Tyler and Shane. Also Max, who sends in the super chat and said it was great to talk with both me and Amanda at this year's TIFF, and that they loved Amanda's rant on Megalopolis. We will get a little bit more into some of the reactions to Megalopolis soon as well, but a lot to talk about from this year's Toronto International Film Festival. I know this is something that Arturo loves to bring up, and we're missing Arturo this week. He's off on a trip into the greater Midwest, but he'll be back to talk movies with us very soon on Monday. But we do want to show off the merch. I know Arturo will be most excited about this part of the podcast. Chase unfortunately left his sweater in the laundry.
Yeah, mine's in the washer
got,
as we speak. So I didn't get the brief on the merch show off. So
yeah, that's my bad. Amanda, I know you picked up a hat this year at TIFF.
I don't know why. I liked the red hat.
It's a clean look.
I liked it. It kind of gave me the Steve Zissou vibes.
Yeah,
Zissou.
Totally.
And then
I love a brightly colored beanie.
Yeah, and then not merch specifically, but freebie goodies was the Pump It Up headband from The Substance, which I love so dearly. And we have a fun story about how this came into my possession that we can get into later.
It's traveled through a lot of hands. I don't know. Should we get into that right now? Because it was Chase who sort of like sparked that all off.
It's true.
Yeah. So if we're getting into story time, so I get on a plane.
Yeah, while you tell the story time, I'm going to show off my TIFF color changing mug, which apparently changes color.
Okay.
With hot water or hot liquid. So
is this like an instant thing, or should I start the story and we'll see how long this
is?
Yeah, we'll see how long it takes.
Okay, sounds good. So I had a layover in Montreal, which threw me off as soon as I landed because the guy said merci, and I forgot they speak French in a lot of Canada. Oh, that is an awesome mug.
That is very cool.
Yeah, look how quick that's changing. That's pretty dope.
That's awesome. But
cool.
Yeah, so I go to my layover, and on the second flight, this kid is sitting in front of me, and all of a sudden he turns around and is like, "Oh, you're on the Toronto International Film Festival." And I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, "I know you are." Like, there's a lot of people that go to this festival. We have the look, you can kind of tell. So super nice guy. I started talking to him, and I'm like, "Oh, what are you excited to see?" And he says, "Oh, like this guy Sean's got this big movie Anora coming. I can't wait to see it." And I was like, Sean Baker? Like that Sean? So we started talking, and he pretty much talks about how Red Rocket was like his favorite movie ever, and pretty much tried to get in contact with Sean Baker. And to do that, he sent him like a signed porno DVD box set and somehow got it to Sean Baker. And he said Sean was super cool. He sent him back a whole like care package of signed stuff, followed him on Instagram. And we ended up having Airbnbs in similar spots.
Mm-hmm.
So he hopped in my Uber with me. I said, yeah, just hop in, we can figure it out. And he's just DMing Sean Baker right there. Like, oh, if you have an extra Anora ticket, and Sean Baker's like liking the message. So it's just like one of those things. I'm like, oh, this is like a super cool guy. Like already set the tone of these are the people I want to be around at the Toronto International Film Festival. And then I find out later that Amanda encounters him as well.
Yeah, coming out of Life of Chuck, I'm wearing the Mike Flanagan shirt, and he's like, "I like your shirt," and then I was like, "Oh, I'm like your headband," because he's wearing that, and I had already got this from Brother Bro, Oscar Expert's brother, and then I'm walking away, and then one of them's like, "I think that was Amanda the Jedi," and then he turns around, he's like, "Are you Amanda the Jedi?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I talked with them for a minute. Really nice, really chill people, but then I kept running into him, and I thought it was like over the course of 3 days, but it was literally just 3 different times in like 2 days. It's time works weird at film festivals, but it's when we're coming out of Anora, because he did get a ticket. We're coming out of Anora, and he's talking about things, and then he says like, I think it was something about messaging Sean Baker's manager trying to get into the after party, and I was like, were you on a flight with someone named Chase? And he's like, Chase talked to you about me? And I was like, yeah, like not in a weird way, but like, interesting stories. You guys were on a play together, so it was good. And then by a roundabout way, it turns out that he was the kid who gave Brother Bro the Pump It Up headband that eventually made it into my possession. So
shout out Michael. He's a great
guy. Michael. Yeah, he's really good. And yeah, I followed him on Instagram, and he was like really thankful for all of us being so nice. And he's so excited for more film festivals now. So that's good. We did good.
Yeah, shout out Michael. Hope you see this. You were our #1 celebrity at this year's TIFF.
Yeah, because we were talking
walking the
about
streets
him,
with your headband.
Yeah, like fairly regularly. We're just talking about like this fun story about this kid who got correspondence with Sean Baker by sending an autographed porn box set without realizing that we'd all been like running into this kid. It's so funny.
Yeah, so that was a great story. And then
Yeah.
any other big stories of the festival that I'm missing?
I'm trying to think if there's any other big moments we had together. We had a nice dinner together on the first night. We had several nice dinners
We
together.
had a lot
Shout
of
out,
good times.
shout out,
Several
Hey
Hey
Lucy.
Lucy
They're always kind to us
Hey,
there.
Hurts my
Lucy.
stomach for sure.
Yeah.
Going through the rest of the merch I picked up, at least similar to the design on this mug, I got this TIFF notebook. I think it's kind of cool. I like when the logo is kind of underplayed there. And then I had to pick up the posters just to put them around the set. I got I think they call this the crowd poster, and then behind me is the other poster that I forget the name of, but kind of nice, fun graphics, fun color splashes.
Isn't it like the what is it? What do you call a cityscape? Something like that.
Oh, yeah. So let's call it the something
like
like that poster. For sure. But yeah, always nice to bring back mementos. I mean, Chase, you have to get something at your first Toronto.
I know. I wasn't going to spend $80 on the sweatshirt, but then Amanda reminded me it is Canadian money, so it's really not that expensive.
Basically free.
But
yeah,
basically free.
Pretty on par.
But I got a 2024 TIFF sweatshirt, so I figured it's my first year. I'll do that. And then I got my girlfriend a Marcel the Shell pin from the little A24 section. So
nice.
A little something, yeah. I like how the shop had not just TIFF stuff. You know, A24 had a little get up as like a film book section.
Yeah,
like Studio Ghibli,
cool
Hayao Miyazaki stuff. It was cool. Yeah,
it's a cool store.
So yeah, a bunch of cool stuff for sure. But before we get into the actual movies that played TIFF, just a reminder that you can follow along with what we're talking about on the show by following the Intercut Letterboxd account, which is right there. In letterboxd.com/intercutpod, easy enough. And we're always putting together lists based on the episodes. So every movie that we mention will get thrown into these letterbox lists by the end of the broadcast. Also, while you're checking out our various channels, be sure to stop by the patreon.com/intercutpod, where you can either join for free just for regular updates on what's going on in the podcast, or become a member for as little as $3 a month to get access to episodes early, as well as our monthly video chats with the patrons, either here on Patreon, or either there or Patreon, or right here. You can join by clicking the join membership button on YouTube, also for as little as $3 a month. Fun way to support the show and help ensure we can keep bringing you coverage like our favorite festivals or favorite films out of festivals like Toronto. But we should talk about some of those movies that we saw in Toronto that we loved. We have each prepared a top 10 of different films that played at Toronto, whether they were world premieres there or just North American and Canadian premieres there. A variety of movies. Chase, why don't you start us off? What movie ended up at number 10 on in your trip? And how many movies did you end up seeing, by the way? Because you stayed in Toronto longer than any of us.
I did. I skipped a few screenings for work, unfortunately. I was trying to get to 40. I got to 37 technically, but I rewatched one movie. So I'm going to say 38. We'll get to that later because it definitely makes my top 10.
We'll get you a couple screener links so you can get up to 40. That's close enough.
Thank you. Appreciate it. But yeah, looking at my top 10, I think I'm really confident in my 10, but for like whatever my 11th spot would be, there's probably 15 movies that are all in the 11th spot. So I'm pretty comfortable with my 10th spot going to a Brazilian film called I'm Still Here. This comes from Walter Sales. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. This is the guy that made the film Central Station, which is notoriously hard to get a hold of. But if you find a way to get it, I'm telling you, it's a great movie. Highly recommend it. I wouldn't say this is on that. If Central Station is a great movie, I'm Still Here is a really good movie. So it pretty much, without spoiling it, follows the story in the 1970s Brazil, specifically Rio. And it follows a family that's kind of involved in politics, but there's also a huge dictatorship thing going on. And I hate talking about the movie now because it's so hard to talk about it without spoiling it. Like if you watch the first 30 minutes, you probably have no idea what's going to happen the next 90. So I don't know how specific I want to get with certain things other than if you're into like a really serious drama, which is, it's kind of reminiscent, not story wise, but the way I felt about the Iron Claw, where I didn't realize this was a true story going in. And by the time it's over, you're like, how the hell is this a real thing that somebody had to go through? It's a really powerful story. Fernanda Torres gives one of the best performances by far that I saw at the festival. I don't have the list off the top of my head, but she would definitely make the top 5, potentially top 3. I think she's absolutely incredible in this. It's a very emotional story. I didn't cry, but it got me pretty damn close to getting there. The ending really sits with me a lot. There's a couple parts where maybe you could have trimmed it down. It was one of the longer ones I saw. It was close to like 2 hours, 20 minutes, but
137 minutes.
Yeah, so it's up there. And I think in the beginning, I think some people, if this was on Netflix, they would turn it off because they think it's a little too slow, which is a shame because that's when the real meat of the story starts to really build up and there's some callbacks to things going on in the beginning. I love how this film is shot. I love how the film is written. I love how the film is acted. Again, I don't want to talk about what the movie's about because I think I didn't know much about Brazilian politics during this time. So I think the film does a good job of giving you all the context you need within the first 10 minutes. And yeah, just a really impressive movie. I know there's consideration that it could end up on the Oscar shortlist for Best International this year. Nice. And off the top of my head, it would probably be my favorite of the major ones that have been talked about. I didn't see All We Imagine as Light, but I think I'm Still Here is a really solid family drama. I think it's an important one to see. But again, if you don't know the politics or the story of this family, I don't want to really talk about it.
Yeah, because it does take place in the 1970s, like during Brazilian's dictatorship era. So that at least puts you like into a time frame. But like, yeah, the specifics of it, I know for Caitlin, it was also one that she didn't want to get too much into, but she was telling me she had a really powerful reaction to it. Like it's very emotional and very devastating. So it seems like a film that would leave a lasting impact.
For sure. It's definitely one I'm more excited to talk about when a lot more people get the chance to see it and we can kind of go in more in-depth conversation. But yeah. I feel confident in mentioning it in my top 10 movies at the festival for sure.
Awesome. All right. So starting things off with a sad one, but potentially a very worthwhile one. I'm excited to catch that one because I have a screening of it coming up for New York Film Festival. So I'm sure we'll get into it on a later intercut. But Amanda, let's keep it sad. Let's hear what you have at number 10 on your list.
Actually, I'm pulling a last minute rug pull here.
All right, cool.
I mentioned it. I watched it technically after the fest was done, but I had a link for it, so I'm counting it. I'm going with the Gesuidouz, the Japanese punk band movie that has just got like so much spunk, so much heart. Doesn't have like the full same vibes as something like Dinner in America, but it kind of just gives me the same feeling. It is really just focused on this creative process and how difficult that can be. And just kind of like that last chance to make it, and just all the different references that are in it are really fun, and how they really idolize so much of the like the rock star lifestyle from the West, and just different attitudes like that towards the punk. And it's kind of weird because usually movies like this, you're like kind of expecting them to play a lot of music throughout, but it takes a really long time for them to actually like display a song. But it's like they held it off to be so good once it actually hits and you hear the music. I kind of wish I had been at the midnight premiere because they were giving out CDs like as if the band had actually premiered there, which would have been sick. So I can only imagine what that Midnight Madness screening was like. I think this is a very, very fun movie. I feel like if you're like not the type of person who's into any kind of punk music, or just like there's a lot of love for horror in it as well. If like those topics aren't really your thing, you might not vibe with it, but I had a ton of fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Kyle, the live stream, saying that this was their favorite of the Midnight Madness showings. And
nice.
It does seem like a movie that would go over well with that kind of crowd. Definitely cool that you responded to this one. I was very curious about it. So yeah, Gesuidouz, number 10 on Amanda's list. For number 10 on my top 10 of the festival, I'm going to go with The Order. I don't know if Chase, you have this on yours, or did you?
It's not my top 10, but I definitely liked it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know Amanda was maybe a little more mixed on it, but I think it's a pretty
like it a lot.
solid. Okay, cool. So it's a pretty solid true crime thriller of sorts that takes place in the 80s as the FBI and local law enforcement investigate this white supremacist gang that's operating in sort of the greater West, from Colorado to Idaho and stuff. You have Jude Law playing this kind of grizzled FBI veteran who's bringing a bit of like Gene Hackman and the French Connection energy to the part. And then there's also a pretty interesting turn from like one of our more reliably villainous character actors recently, Nicholas Hoult, playing this kind of turbocharged white supremacist of sorts, who comes in and sort of puts a spark under this like teeming resentment. And I think the film does a really good job of putting you in like a time and place in the like specific location of that the story, the backdrop of the story. You have this sort of running thread with this local radio announcer based on a real guy who's played by Mark Maron here, sort of serving to kind of provide a kind of counter narrative to the hateful rhetoric that the Nicholas Hoult side of the story is spewing. But it just is like a pretty tense, cops and criminals story. The gang, the white supremacist gang, is committing bank robberies in order to, develop enough of a financial backing that they can actually flex some muscle in terms of their military prowess. And there's just this like bubbling tension to the film that leads to a pretty thrilling final act. So I really responded to this one. I don't know if either of you have any particular responses to it other than that.
It's like, yeah, pretty similar. The one thing I felt was funny is that it takes so long. Like, I don't think a single good guy in this movie actually lands a shot. I don't think anybody who's on the good side who shoots a gun gets anywhere near what they're trying to hit. It's like to a comical level, to like stormtrooper levels.
There's one shot, yeah, where he hits the back of her car.
Yeah, that was when I was finally like, I'm like, how many times can you not do this? And I do feel like there's kind of maybe areas to Jude Law's character where I felt like they either needed to go deeper or like cut some of it out, just in terms to like make more way for the wider story. But no, it was really good and it's interesting because I went into it not realizing it was a real story.
Right. Yeah. I also didn't realize it was a true story. So that was an interesting surprise with it too. And yeah, I wouldn't say this is like destined to be a modern classic, but I do think it's pretty solid.
It's the solid, if it's on cable, your dad's going to sit down and watch it. Yeah. It's a solid, good time. Yeah. It's not going to blow anybody away, but I don't see a lot of people walking out of this saying, oh yeah, that wasn't that good. I feel like it's a pretty easy movie to have fun with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Even though it's a crazy, not so fun topic, but they make it a fun movie for sure.
Yeah.
What are you trying to say, Chase?
Yeah, I don't know.
What are you trying to say?
Well, Chase, we'll give you something to pivot to. What is your number 9 from TIFF?
Okay, if we're talking about fun movies, we're going to talk about a really fun movie right now. We're talking about The Shadow Strays, which is the only Midnight Madness movie I have ever done. But first of all, I skipped a lot of Midnight Madness movies, which I don't regret because I'm somebody, I need to function on sleep. And if I did The Substance night 1, ending at 3 a.m., I would have been exhausted. I wouldn't have had any good takes about any movie I watch after that. So I don't regret it. But the last night I did do The Shadow Strays, which I had not huge expectations of. The director, Timo Tahanto, I probably butchered the name. I haven't seen a lot of his stuff besides like his VHS work. So, and that's not even really his own movie, but I've heard The Night Comes for Us is an awesome time. I just haven't seen it yet.
There's a lot of like action horror people who really swear by this guy, and I, like you, haven't seen a lot of his work. He had this movie on Netflix a couple of years ago, The Big Four, that was pretty fun, but I haven't had a full Timo Tanto experience quite yet. But how was
let me tell you, he's got some diehard fans for sure, because there were people not every Q&A question, but there were a couple. The guy 2 seats down was like, yeah, I drove from Chicago today just to see this movie. So, and a lot of people are like, does this connect to your other movies? So the guy has a dedicated fan base, and this definitely sold me on checking out the rest of his stuff. If you are a fan of the Raid or John Wick type of action, this is the bloodiest version of that. And I would argue the action is probably better than a lot of those movies. Like, I think I didn't know what to expect, but it opens with maybe my favorite action sequence of the decade. And then every action sequence after that gets better. This is usually not my kind of movie. I appreciate a good action movie, but they're not usually the ones that make my top 10 of the year list, just because it's not my personal favorite. But this is a hard movie to not have a fun time with. I am kind of pissed it's going on Netflix because the audience was going wild for this. It teases something at the end that I am so down for Shadow Strays too. It's worth the price of admission just for the action scenes. The lore is very basic. Operatives doing assassin type shit. They try and tie in a bit of a more emotional story, which works out okay. But I think I prefer John Wick in terms of like the lore and the character and that kind of stuff. But in terms of pure action, I really think this gives it a run for its money. I had an absolute great time with it. And I think everyone else that's seen, if you're into this kind of movie, this is making your top 10 of the year for sure. It might not be there for me by the end of the year, but I just had such a fun time with it. It's 2.5 hours. It was 11:30 at night on my last night, and I wasn't pissed sitting there. I had a great time. And yeah, it's definitely a movie to get high off of. Highly recommend checking it out. I think it comes out on Netflix in October. Could be wrong on that, but definitely worth watching for sure.
I kind of wish I had gone, but when we stood up after leaving the taco place, like my legs felt weird, and I was like, I gotta go to sleep.
You're out, yeah.
Because I was even gonna go just for like 30 minutes just to get the vibe, and I was like, no, I'm going home. This is not good.
Yeah, I'm definitely jealous that you got that experience. It sounds like it was a really fun one. And yeah, you're right. October 17th should be available on Netflix. So don't have to wait that long to catch up with it. Very exciting. Amanda, what do you have at number 9?
This one's tough because I feel like I do need to see it again to fully appreciate it. But like what it does so well and what resonated with me, I think earns it the spot at least. I'm going to go with The Brutalist. In the 9th spot. I don't even necessarily know what to say about it. It's just, there's so much going on. There's an entire intermission. Me and Chase kind of had the same feeling that, or at least me and Tyler had the same, maybe it was probably Chase too, that before the intermission is better. And then it was you and me. And then it felt like it kind of went into a different direction where I liked like half of what was going on and then wasn't sure how I was resonating with the other half. But I hear that like on repeat viewing that changes. Just kind of like reframing certain things once you look into it more. I really like what it's doing. I feel like it's very layered in a lot of areas. Incredible performance out of oh my god, his name's totally
Adrian Brody or
Guy Adrian
Pearce?
Brody. Yeah, both. Guy Pearce, both of them, so good. So there's a lot to really enjoy about this story of somebody trying to build their life in America after the war.
Yeah, it is an epic story of immigration and sort of like the American dream and then sort of what happens to that. I actually just got to catch this movie on Wednesday here in New York at the New York Film Festival. But I feel like in a lot of ways, I mirror that reaction because that first half is so electric and rousing, and it just kind of pulls you in, and you can't help but be just locked into this story. And then the second half is sort of the downfall, and I don't know, partially I feel like it's harder to respond to because it's giving you less to really like hold on to and attach to and feel good about. But part of it is also just like the air being let out of the balloon, and it's a hard movie to even fully discuss because it is so massive, not just in length at 3.5 hours with that intermission, but in terms of scope, in terms of density, there's so much in this film. Like my reaction to it, I felt like was similar to my first reaction to seeing like Tar or The Master, these movies where I was pretty in all of them from the start, but not yet ready to feel like I could put my finger on exactly how I feel about all these different decisions, because there's so much going on in these films. But at least for me, I thought The Brutalist was a pretty massive film experience, and even the parts that I'm not as sure about, I'm still like contemplating, and it's going to stick with me for the rest of the year, 100%.
For sure. I'll be the one person that I so me and Amanda, we did literally in the intermission, we passed each other and I was like, what do you think? And you were like, it's good. I'm like, I'm thinking the same thing. Like it's really good. And I do want to be on the record saying The Brutalist is objectively a good movie. Like I think every movie should look and feel like this. And at first I was like, well, they can't because it's so expensive to shoot on film. But then you find out the budget is around $10 million. And you're like, then what are we doing with every other movie? Like it definitely feels like one of those epic movies. For me, it doesn't deliver all the way. I was definitely on board the first half, and the second half is not bad. It's just, I don't know, like by the end, I wasn't fully satisfied, and I'm definitely going to watch it again. Just because I'm sure with something like this, with what you guys are saying, there's so many little things in the beginning that have better payoff that you maybe don't recognize on the first viewing. Definitely excited to rewatch it again. I would just be lying if I came out of here saying this is the definitive, objective best movie of the decade, because I just don't personally feel that way.
I agree.
I don't think it's on the level of a There Will Be Blood or Godfather for me, just because those movies feel epic, but also you can recommend them to pretty much anybody because the story is also like not, and The Brutalist isn't trying to be necessarily The Godfather or There Will Be Blood. It feels that way, but I don't think it's necessarily a one-to-one comparison because The Brutalist is a much smaller, quieter movie versus The Godfather. People are getting shot in restaurants. You know, it's not the same kind of thing, but I do think in that regard, I'm not fully sold on The Brutalist yet, but it is objectively a good movie for sure.
Yeah, like I think any comparison to films like The Godfather and There Will Be Blood is a pretty unfair one to make. And you know, there are ways in which you see that because there's like an ambition to this type of movie. It really is trying to be a big statement on America and immigration and assimilation and how, you know, particularly immigrant labor is sort of exploited in a way by America. But you know, it certainly is not a movie that is like full of things that are immediately rewarding. And I don't know if it can really stand the test of the time the same way those other films do. It does have like pretty remarkable production. We talked a little bit about the look of the film, which is very famously now already shot on VistaVision and blown up to 70 millimeter. And it just has this incredible texture to the images where the colors just have this worn feeling in a way that puts it in a weird way alongside those classic films. But even beyond that, just like, you know, the film is very centrally talking about this brutalist type of architecture. And when they do have the sequence where they show off the architecture, the design of it's pretty stunning. In addition with the score, which I know you agree with me is one of the standout scores of the year.
For sure. I thought nothing was going to take down Dune Part 2, but I see the argument for The Brutalist.
That's fair.
For sure.
Yeah. So shout out.
We did
Daniel
World to
Bloomberg.
Come.
Yeah, which I've heard is another good score. I don't really remember that one, but a relatively newcomer in the film composing space, Daniel Bloomberg.
Yeah, it kind of just seems like they went for, which makes sense, cheaper, less well-known, but like very talented people, so that like giving them a chance to jump off careers, but then also being able to keep to that budget. I think overall it is like just a tour de force of a movie, and there are so many interesting dynamics. It's just there's like parts of it that you're like, why did we choose to go this direction? And those are the areas I'm interested to kind of rewatch just to see what the dynamic is there. But there is a lot that even with the people that are supposed to be respecting him and his work, there is still a very much like this is my little pet toy type attitude to the whole thing, which I think is an interesting dynamic that no matter who he's dealing with, he's being just kind of mishandled or I can't think of it right now, but
there are some things at the end that maybe become a little more literal that I don't know if necessarily need to, but on a repeat viewing, maybe it feels different. And it's a film that does demand to be kind of like digested and pondered over, I think.
For sure.
So, wherever we are now, I feel like we will not be where we are on this movie a couple months from
a year
now.
ago or a year from now.
Yeah, exactly. So I believe that was Amanda's number 9. my number 9, I'm going to put Saturday Night. I have a feeling it's going to show up a bit later on at least one of these lists.
It's my number 8, so we could transition right into that from there.
Amanda, how high up is it on yours?
7.
Okay, so I think we could talk a little
all
bit
in the
about
same
it
range.
Now.
Yeah.
We'll go.
Saturday Night. I mean, I think this is one of the more hotly anticipated films of the festival, telling the lead up to the premiere of the first episode of Saturday Night Live, following Lorne Michaels and the cast of characters as they scramble to make it live to air. And it's a really fun, kinetic movie from Jason Reitman. We talked about it a bit on our recap, but we haven't heard from Chase. So Chase, what stood out to you about Saturday Night?
Well, when I first walked out, I was like, that's a good movie. I was at a 3 out of 5, but then the more I sat with it, I was like, damn, I did laugh a lot. Damn, there's some clever little things in here. So I did give it the little bump to the 3.5 because I do think if this is an Oscar contender, this is going to be the fun Oscar contender that you could kind of throw on for anybody. I am not a Saturday Night Live fan. I've never watched a full episode. So I just kind of went in knowing a couple of the big names, and that's kind of it. And I think this is a hard movie. It seems like a lot of people, the reaction at TIFF came out really disappointed with it. I didn't have the highest expectations for it. I just kind of expected a fun movie, and I got a pretty damn fun movie. You know, there's a lot of fun performances in here. The guy that plays Chevy Chase, I thought it was the AI deepfake technology. It was
literally at the end.
Canny.
When his name pops up, my brain was like, oh my God, right. That wasn't actually Chevy Chase. What?
Yeah, like this guy crushed it.
Corey Michael Smith.
Yeah, he's incredible in the movie. It feels one for one. I love the look of this movie. It feels authentic to the time. I love how the movie's pretty much 90 minutes and it's following a consistent 90-minute timeline. This is definitely one of the most fast-paced movies of TIFF. I felt like I was in there for an hour. And when you're at a film festival watching almost 40 movies, you know, you love a movie that feels super quick and you're like, oh shit, I could go get food now. This is awesome. Yeah, just really, really solid. It probably won't make my top 10 of the overall year, but as I'm looking back on my TIFF experience, it's definitely one I'm excited to go back to the theater in a few weeks with my girlfriend and my friends and stuff like that and just laugh a lot because there's a lot of funny performances in here for sure.
Very, very fun. Yeah, I just liked how dynamic it all felt. Like it is just like this really fun, sparky thing where you're technically really just following, for the most part, always Lorne. Every once in a while, there's another character. Like there is a whole scene where you're just following with Rachel Sennett's Rosie Schuster.
Yeah.
And just kind of going through, and that's a really fun little scene. But it doesn't feel, sometimes when you have movies that are paced that way, it almost feels like annoying because it's never letting up for anything. But this does make the time for the story beats, some good emotional moments. I think it's paced incredibly well for what it is. I do think some of it may suffer that like when the movie itself is funnier than the SNL skits that they're performing that we're supposed to believe blew it up. But it's just because the eras are different. Comedy is different, but like they're cracking jokes to me that were funnier than what built an empire in SNL. But that's okay. That's just a different time. I'm like Chase. I've never seen a full episode of SNL. I think I only saw a bunch of skits like 2 years ago because people wanted me to go through a bunch of them on stream one day. So I have no familiarity with this at all and still had just such a good time with it. I just think it's a really solid movie. It's got really good style. It felt good to the era and a lot of really strong performances.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some aspects to the way that the story develops that I ultimately maybe felt like a little bit let down by. I feel like it sort of, it doesn't have like the kind of arc you expect from a movie. It sort of is like build and build and build and then end in a way. But like ultimately, I don't know if that prevented me from having a really good time because, as you mentioned, Amanda, like it's really just got this kinetic energy to it. It just flows. It just moves. It doesn't really. It's not doing so much to get you lost, but it is doing enough to constantly be throwing these new things at you. And it is a film that's pretty full of gags, whether it's the gags that are explicit references to the gags from the show, or just these new gags that they've thrown in and little references to celebrities that showed up or were stopping by, and all these bits to just sort of explore all of that. And there's probably elements of it that are a bit apocryphal or not really that true to exactly how things happened, but I think it all just sort of works to give you kind of like this spinning plates carnival act kind of feel to it. So it's a really entertaining time. And even if I maybe am not, completely sold on the movie, it is one of the films from TIFF that I'm probably most looking forward to watching again, just because it's entertaining and full of good performances. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Blackberry thing. Like, we all walked out of Blackberry really enjoying it, probably more than this, I would say, but it's really rewatchable. Like, out of that South by Southwest, I've watched like Bottoms and Blackberry more than anything. And this kind of has that same kind of vibe of like, it's going to be so easy just to pop on whatever you're doing and still enjoy it.
Absolutely.
And I gotta say, the Jim Henson jokes crushed me the most.
I know.
Out of everything in the movie.
They're so
everything
good.
Muppet related, I was dying at. So
yeah, I did find out apparently it was supposed to be Benny Safdie playing Kaufman, and he couldn't make it very, very last minute, and that's why there's somebody playing two characters, to the point that someone thought that was a bit.
I gotta be honest, I didn't realize he was playing two different characters. Like, now that I watched the trailer after I saw the movie, and then I caught it, but in the moment, I definitely had no idea. So
the accent didn't give it away.
No, I also never watched New Girl. Is that what he's on? Is that the
Succession? No, he's Succession.
Oh wait, really?
He's Greg.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen Succession yet either, so I have to leave this podcast. It's a
that's fair. That's fair.
All right, so Saturday night, really entertaining time. That is my number 9, Chase's number 8, Amanda's number 7, but I think we got to go back to Amanda's number 8.
I think I'm going to put Life of Chuck here. This is one, I was really looking forward to it. I'm a big Mike Flanagan fan. And I know he can handle the emotional gut punches. So when I found out he was making a movie that was Stephen King, but not a horror, I was like, I have faith. He can handle it, because the things that kind of set his horror apart is that they do always reach this level of like existential, brutal, emotional horror, as well as like delivering on the scares as well. So I figured that this story in particular, that has so much to do with a life and what it means to be alive, and the things that make life worth living, I think he really nailed it. And I like the way that they did it as like an inverted narrative structure as you're building into like what's happening. I know, Zach, we talked about it quite a bit in the first episode, but just more that you were more into the first dystopian hellscape horror that the first one was. And I do really like that one, but I love how it kind of comes together at the end, and just him walking into the room. No spoilers as to what it is, but just like it just really starts hitting on the emotional scale of, thinking about the things that do make a life worth living versus like what is valuable to society, and like what is valuable to society in a way that people might not initially think is actually considered valuable. And those
in a
are
more intangible kind of way.
The intangible things that make life. So I really thought that was really beautiful. It is one of the ones I'm very excited to revisit because of that. So it's in my number 8 spot.
Yeah, it's also kind of interesting because I know you're not typically a fan of anthology films, and this is sort of like, it gives you a little bit of that anthology feeling without feeling quite so disconnected and random.
And and that's kind of why I liked Freaky Tales out of Sundance more than I initially thought I was going to. I'm pretty cool with it if everything does feel like it's serving a goal. So I also liked Kinds of Kindness a lot more than other people did. I just felt like there was at least enough of a through line there thematically. I guess it might just depend on the style of anthology, because usually I hear that and I'm out. But this one was very good. It kind of almost feels a little bit like an extended, we've heard this about a couple movies from this TIFF, but like a little bit like, not fully, but like an extended Black Mirror episode where, but that's a Black Mirror episode that's more on the side of like a San Junipero versus the horror side of things. It just kind of has that feel where it hits the dread, but then is trying to do something a little bit more wholesome with its ending. So The Life of Chuck.
Life of Chuck, the People's Choice Award winner. Chase, were you surprised when they announced it?
I gotta be honest, I wasn't fully surprised. I texted my sister the morning before or the day of, and she was like, what do you think is gonna win? And I was like, the movie that most people are saying here that they all liked was The Life of Chuck. You know what I mean? I don't know how many people are blown away by it, but I don't see many people really disliking it. I fall in the camp of, when I was watching it, I am definitely a Flanagan fan, like in terms of a lot of his horror stuff. Midnight Mass, I still think is his best thing. Like, I
It's
think
good.
not enough people talk about it.
It's
But
good.
I wanted to see what he would do differently with this. And even though I wouldn't say it's one of the most well-made movies I do think it's by far one of the best that works like emotionally, that you could throw on for the average person. You know, like not every movie has to be like, that's super artistic.
The Brutalist. Not
people like
everything
us-
has to be the Brutalist, you know?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know?
Like nothing that, sometimes you don't need to dissect something too much. Like it just has to hit the note home for the average person that watches movies. You know what I mean? And I think if you're looking at it from that lens, Life of Chuck does it really damn good.
Yeah.
I'm with Zach. I think the first third is by far the best third. I'm not as into it later on, but at the same time, with what Amanda was saying, the script does such a good job at calling back certain things from the first act that it makes you go, okay,
so
well,
fun.
it is like smartly written. You know what I mean? Like it's got a lot of good ideas there. And overall, I came out of it saying, I don't know how good of a movie it is, but it definitely made me feel something. You know what I mean? And I think that's why it's a good People's Choice winner. I'm not an Oscar analyst. I'm not one of these people. I don't know.
Neither.
I didn't walk out of that movie saying that's a best picture contender, but not every movie I enjoy needs to be a best picture contender.
Well,
so
that's the thing, right? Because the People's Choice Award winner has this long correlation with the Oscars Best Picture. Like there's certain things that I think, especially the Oscars prognosticators, really expect from the TIFF People's Choice. But like that's not what the award's there for. It's the award for people responding to the movie. And it is a movie that I think really does elicit like a really emotional response. I'd find it hard to imagine people sitting through that and not having some kind of reaction to it, even if it isn't necessarily like their favorite. Like it does kind of pull at the heartstrings and really enrich your soul in a way. So it's not a surprising winner. It's just an unexpected contrast to like the Oscar-y type of movies that were expected to win it. Because I still don't think it's necessarily going to be like a big Oscars player, and that's not anything against this movie. It's just like, as Amanda mentioned, like this is not The Brutalist. It's that there's different spectrums to what a good movie can be, and I think people will respond to this as well. So
yeah,
Amanda got Life of Chuck at number 8 on her list. Shifting to my number 8, I have Nightbitch. Is this one going to show up higher on anybody else's, or am I the only one who has it?
I think you're the only. Well, I don't have Nightbitch on my 10. Do you, Chase?
I do not. No.
All right, so let's talk about it a little bit now. The new film from Marielle Heller, starring Amy Adams, and there's a lot of elements to it that are maybe a little bit like trite and familiar because it's the story of this mother who is finding the entrapments of being a mom in the suburbs and sort of giving up aspects of her life in order to service that are limiting her and making her feel like she's giving up parts of who she is. And the way that I think it's explored through Marielle Heller's really charming writing and through this like very big performance from Amy Adams, who is just sort of willing to go to some really silly, strange places. I thought it was really fun. I thought it like had a lot of very charming, relatable moments. It just made me laugh a bit more than I expected to. I think we often think of Amy Adams as this really powerful, dramatic actress, but she's also just like a really funny presence in films from like Enchanted to The Muppets. She like knows how to deliver a joke. And this movie just had a lot of good jokes in it in my mind. It didn't blow me away dramatically, but I did, find it relatable. I found it charming. I think Scoot McNairy also is particularly giving a pretty good performance as the sort of like somewhat like thoughtless husband. He's not playing him. He's not playing him like a evil or conniving person, just as like a little bit of an oaf, but a well-meaning one.
The weaponized incompetence, whether he's fully aware, just the like, I can take care of it, but then constantly being like, I need this, I need this, I need this, and then not, doing anything on his own.
Exactly.
That kind of vibe. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had a good time with this one. I can see people really responding to it. It's not necessarily a story that will blow you away, but I think it's solidly entertaining.
Yeah, I did really like it. And I know it's the one person I know who saw it at the festival who was a mom gave it a 4.5 stars. And she has a very supportive husband, very hands-on husband. So it's like, even without that, it's going to speak to people, just the general way society, which was definitely a theme of the festival, the way society treats women as they enter different phases of their lives. So I did think that was really interesting. I liked how they handled it, with her kind of like what she's thinking versus what ends up actually happening in reality. There are some people who seem way too confused by the movie, which is a little, there's a couple movies this year where I was like more concerned about media literacy than usual. And it wasn't young people, it was older people that I'm like, I don't understand how you don't. Okay, cool. Because like, I don't think this movie's trying to be esoteric or confusing with what it's doing, but that's okay. I thought it was pretty solid. I'm interested to check out the book at some point just to see where it differs. I've heard so many different opinions on both the movie and the book, so it'll be interesting to see what happens once it hits like wider release. But I thought Amy Adams was like fantastic in it, as someone who doesn't have an issue with Amy Adams, but has never been like really, really, really blown away by an Amy Adams performance. So
yeah, it's charming. Not like we were saying, it's one of those things that probably covers familiar ground, but if you're going through it, you'll find a lot to connect to with it.
Yeah.
It was one of those movies I mentioned. There's 15 movies going for my 11 spot. This is probably in that batch. It's enjoyable. Fair. It's funny. Didn't blow me away, but the thing that I like about movies is if it could put you in the shoes of an experience you've never done, like I've never been a mom. It made me feel like I was a frustrated mom.
Yeah,
right. Like it does a really good job at doing a lot of that. I just think it's funnier than I thought it would be. I didn't watch the trailer. People were shitting on the trailer. I still haven't seen the trailer, but I could definitely say it's a good movie. It's a good time. Bring a couple friends. Like it's fun. Yeah, kind of like Saturday Night, but I did like Saturday Night more personally.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And it's just one of those things that's about these kind of things that are eternally true about society and gender differences, even if they might, be subtle or things like that. So I had a good time with it. Nightbitch number 8. Let's go back to Chase for his number 7.
Yeah, we could decide if we want to talk about now, because I know Friendship is definitely going to pop up on both of your lists. It is my number 7.
It's higher up
for a little later.
Okay,
we'll save it for later.
We'll save it.
Yeah.
All right, I'll say my piece on it then. But speaking of funny movies, it's definitely a funny movie. But we'll talk about it in a bit.
All right, so Friendship's Chase's number 7. Amanda's number 7 was Saturday Night, which we just talked about. Chase, do you have Flow in your top 10?
I do not, but it's one of those 15 that is going for the 11 spot. So
yeah, so let's talk about it a little bit. I have it at number 7 on my list. I think this is a really charming film. The animated adventure from the Latvian animators that is one of 2 films at TIFF that's sort of about wild animals learning to cooperate when there's a threat coming from them. But I thought this was a really, really sweet and visually kind of I don't know, like really well put together film in just the way that it sweeps you up in the adventure. I think the camera movements in this one particularly just gets you kind of like at a very animal level in the way that you explore the world almost side by side with them. Just some of these shots with where you're running alongside this cat are really beautifully rendered. And it's an interesting film because there's no spoken dialogue. It's not a bunch of anthropomorphized animals. They're basically acting as animalistic as a movie like this will allow, but it's just full of these really evocative moments and these kind of beautiful comings together of animals that should be enemies and stuff like that. I just thought this was a really sweet and beautifully rendered film. You liked it as well, Chase?
Yeah, I definitely walked out of it enjoying it. It's definitely the one that got a lot of reactions out of the public screenings that I got. Like there was an older lady in front of me that just was praying to God the animals would make it out okay, which made it really fun for me. My boy Will kept telling me this was one of his most anticipated of the year because apparently this animator has been up to a lot of good things. Like he said this was the first project he collaborated on with people, and I felt bad because in broken English he was kind of describing how he felt like the cat, and some people were kind of laughing while he was doing it. But I think by the end of the movie, everyone shut up because it's a very impressive technically in every kind of way. It doesn't seem like there were a ton of animators on the project, and it looks better than a lot of animated movies I've seen.
Apparently they made this one in Blender also, which is
good for them.
A free technology. So
yeah, it
pretty
is
awesome.
I mean, the guys, someone asked him who composed the music because it was beautiful. And he's like, well, I did. And, like, did it on his laptop. And he said he was like super emotional when he saw an orchestra like actually perform it. So the dude is super talented. And even though I didn't fall in love with the movie, it's undeniably an easy movie to watch. It was great to put towards the end of my festival. And if anything, I'm just super excited to see what the director does next because there's so much potential. And there's so much, like Zach was saying, there's a couple sequences that are like 5 minutes long. And I know it's a digital camera, but it feels so alive. And I just really liked it a lot. Yeah, definitely a high honorable mention for me.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of those films that you'll hear a lot of people championing when it comes down to like the short lists for the animated feature awards. Like I'm really hoping this sneaks its way into the Oscars final 5. I thought it was pretty well done. Shout out to Kyle in the live stream who also really loved Flow and talked about wanting to see what Gintz, the director, would do with a larger budget. Although, yeah, would a bigger studio allow him to make something that is ostensibly a silent film like this one? I think that's sort of been his mode of operation prior to this too. It's interesting too because it is a nice sort of counter to the very hyperactive American style of animated movie. Like if you're looking for something that's maybe a little bit more a little bit less ADD for that you could show to a little less Chris Pratt to show your kids, this might be a great option. So I got Flow at number 7. Let's go back to Chase's 6.
Yeah, my number 6 is a movie I know I'm the only one here that has seen. It was getting very divisive reviews at TIFF, but I decided to see it, and I really liked Emilia Perez a lot. This is so when it comes to wild movies, I'm very divisive, but I get the most excited for them because I'm like, I want to see what line of the spectrum I'm going to fall on for this. I didn't know much about it. I knew it was a trans experience kind of story. I knew it was a musical, and that's all I knew. And the movie's kind of about that, but it's so much more than that because the person transitioning is the head of one of the most deadliest cartels.
Yeah,
so
I didn't know that was the plot. I didn't know. I knew the cartel stuff. I didn't know that whole other side thing.
Wild, epic story, and it's a musical too. So it's what I just said is pretty much the movie. So Zoe Saldana plays a lawyer that is confronted by I'm pulling up the actress's name, Carla Sofia Gascon, who I haven't seen much from. And it starts out, her character is in the pre-transition phase and is a scary fucking cartel leader. And then the movie goes into I want to transition, and then you get that part of the movie, and then you get post-transition. And there are so many things that happen in each of those phases that are just fucking wild. Selena Gomez is in here, and it's a hard movie, kind of like my Megalopolis experience where I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but in a good way. There is times where they break out into song, and it works when it shouldn't at all. Zoe Saldana is fucking incredible in this movie. I saw she's supposedly going for supporting. In a way, she kind of feels like the lead to me a lot of points in this movie. Whichever she's in, she's my pick for the winner. She's absolutely incredible in this. She's always been an incredible actress, but
a lot of people say that Carla Sofia Gascon also has a shot for lead actress this year, which would obviously be a historic nomination for an out trans actress.
I mean, if I was in charge of the Academy, that's a lock. Like potentially, no, not a win. We'll talk about our performance later, but pretty damn fucking good, especially when you see what she does with the pre-transition character too. Like just a lot of really good stuff in that performance. Yeah, the music sequences, there was more musicals than I thought there would be this year, and this one has some of the best. I don't want to talk about everything because I think part of the fun is, even though it feels like I said a lot about the movie, I'm only touching the surface of a lot of what it goes into. I do think I understand why people say it's a mess of a movie, especially towards the end, but I don't think it's unaware that it's a mess. I think it kind of embraces how crazy everything is. I do think the ending last 15 minutes could have been a little better, but at the same time, like when I look back on this TIFF lineup, there's no way I won't ever forget about Emilia Perez because it's just so memorable. It's such a memorable experience. I kind of lied when I said I'm Still Here was my favorite foreign.
I was gonna say, because this
Yeah.
is France's submission to the Oscars.
Yeah, I kind of
year.
forgot about this one because it's so wild and there's like some English, so I was kind of thrown off.
Right.
But yeah, it's a really awesome movie. I'm looking forward to watching it again. I think I might like it more on a second viewing when I kind of know what to expect.
Awesome.
I can see it's definitely not going to be a movie for everybody. The old lady next to me was not a fan of it.
I was gonna ask because for someone like Amanda, who's a bit of a musical skeptic, would you recommend?
I mean,
this
it's definitely a musical, so I don't know if that
that's
changes your
why-
mind, but it's a crazy story.
Yeah,
sure.
I skipped this movie 4 times. There was 4 available windows for me to watch this movie, and then Megalopolis happened, and I was like, life's too short. I can't do this. I don't know if I'm going to sit there. Like La La Land's one of my favorite movies, and it took me 3 times to watch La La Land, like after starting it and being like, nope, not in the right headspace for this. And I love it. But so I just was like, it's going to be on Netflix in like 2 months. I'll catch it there. I feel fine there.
I hate to be this person.
It's better in a
movie
theater.
movie. It's a movie theater.
And honestly, that's the thing. If it plays in theaters,
crazy.
it'll probably do a theater run because they're clearly pushing it for the Oscars. That's why it had 30,000. That's in slight exaggeration, but there was at least like 15 screenings of it at TIFF if you include the press ones. So it's not going to surprise me if it ends up in theaters here where I can watch it here. And I will. It was just kind of like I was too tired. The screenings just were either very early in the morning or late at night. And I was like, there's so many other things I'd rather be doing right now. So I'll get there for sure. But yeah, it was on my list. And then I think Berjani was like, yeah, there's dancing in a musical. And I was like, it's fucking what? And I was out. Not that I think that's a bad thing. I just didn't see the Deb either, you know?
Right.
It's fair.
So
I didn't either. I didn't see the Deb.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, just speaking of like the opportunities to potentially see this one, Netflix launched their awards page, their For Your Consideration page, just the other day. And what's at the top of it but Emilia Perez? That seems like it's going to be the big movie they push for Oscars this year. They've got like Daughters, they've got his 3 daughters, they've got Hitman, but it feels like Emilia Perez is the one that has the best shot of the movies that Netflix has, at least, to get into that best picture race, to get into that best actress and supporting actress race. So there will probably be more opportunities to see this one, but Chase, it seems like you're glad you got a chance to see it a bit early.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it again for sure. It was one of the most fun movies I saw at TIFF, no question.
Nice.
Kyle is pointing out that it might just be in alphabetical order. It might be, but you look down that list. They've got Piano Lesson. They've got Maria. It kind of feels even with the movies that are later in the alphabet, that Emilia Perez is still kind of the top one. It is the one that's featured in the scroll at the top. I'll say that. So they are putting it front and center in some ways. All right. Chase's number 6 is Emilia Perez. Amanda, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is Relay. And
Ooh,
is that
okay.
also your number 6 or is it your number 5?
I got that at number 5.
Okay. Do we want to wait or
we can talk about it now? Let's talk about it now.
Cool. Relay just feels like this classic return to like the 90s thriller, the early 2000s crime thriller.
Yeah.
It almost feels even dated to that era because like when they're doing the opening title screens, it's like digitalized. Like an alarm clock. And then the only thing that let me know immediately that we were in a modern era is that when they're like walking into an establishment, you saw the DoorDash sign and like wear masks to be considerate type thing. And I was like, okay, we're in the present day. But it has just this like very interesting, just the kind of the way they used to do the crime stuff in the 90s where like there's the crime stuff that's all really interesting, but they're weaving in this romance side plot at the same time because, you know, they're pushing that too. But I love what this movie does with that as you're going through the movie, because there's moments where I was like, this feels kind of unbelievable, but not enough for me not to enjoy the ride. But then you get to where it's going and you're like, oh my God, that made perfect sense. So I think it's both fun, but then a very good look at this concept of like loneliness in an individual and how it can make you put your guard down in ways that you normally wouldn't. And all the things you've done to protect yourself. Because basically Riz Ahmed plays a guy who's made it his job to help people get out of whistleblower situations. So people who have taken information from their companies and then realized, oh shit, I don't want to do this. They know I have it. I just want to go back to my life. And they negotiate a transition of the information and then usually try to get the person set up in a way that they can disappear and everything's good. So it's a very compelling story right from the get-go. And then you're just kind of watching this one particular mission play out.
Exactly. Like he's a corporate fixer. It's a little like Michael Clayton in that sense. Although like it's got a lot of, as you mentioned, the more like 90s, 2000s kind of crime thriller to it too. I do think the parts of it that reminded me of Michael Clayton, reminded me of Margin Call, that kind of like TikTok corporate crisis thing is what I really responded to it. Like the way that they sort of go through these sequence of messages back and forth, and what could be told in a really uninteresting way, they find ways to dramatize it and put in bits of humor, particularly with this sort of relay phone service that is integral to the plot of this movie. I think is just a really clever way of building in the tension and the suspense and the mystery of this film. And then it all sort of like kind of explodes in a sort of like tense shoot 'em up crime esque way that is a little bit Michael Mannish. I really enjoyed this one. I think that there's maybe elements of it that feel a little bit less thoroughly thought through than others, but like there's a couple bits that sequences that are edge of your seat stuff. It's really thrilling. There is a moment that I know Chase and I were talking about that we were completely caught off guard by. I think it's really solid. And we talked earlier about The Order as like the type of like very solid cable thriller. Like this is one of the like top tier versions of that.
That's a fair way to put it. Yeah. That moment, and as I get more cynical, as I get older, I feel like movies less and less surprise me. And I think Relay it's like that. It's like the solid movie that you know is good. But then towards the end, you're like, oh shit, this is what it's going for.
Yeah, that thing that you're
really
like
when a movie does that successfully.
Yeah, like the thing you thought was a flaw was actually a feature. Like you're kind of watching it and you're like, yeah, this doesn't seem like outside the realms of what would be happening, even if it's not super realistic. And then you're like, oh my God, okay, it was a good setup. Good setup.
This was the most tired I was for a movie, and it woke me up, and that's the best compliment I could give a movie like this. So
exactly.
It went for that number 11 spot with 14 other movies on my list, but I definitely give it the thumbs up.
I get it.
All right, so Relay, that's Amanda's number 6. I got it at number 5, but I'll talk briefly about my number 6 because I did mention this on our recap video. Number 6, I'm putting The End, the film from Joshua Oppenheimer. Speaking of musicals, this is another musical that is making our list. This one is a post-apocalyptic film that takes place entirely inside of a rich family's doomsday bunker. And it's just this really interesting blend of this very muted palette and world and these characters who are not really willing to explore themselves, but they're given a style of film that is kind of made for inner reflection and confession and stuff. So you feel the film almost in like a tug of war with itself and its characters. And I found that to be really fascinating. I thought it was really kind of beautifully done in parts, just with the way that it's shot. And the scenery of it all, and particularly the acting is what really really captivated me. With you have Tilda Swinton, you have George McKay, who has really been surprising me with every new role that he takes on. I liked Michael Shannon a lot in this movie. Moses Ingram as well is really excellent here. It's definitely not going to be a film for everyone. I feel awkward recommending it to people because I know it's not even going to be a film that most people think are going to be okay. I think a lot of people are going to be upset and bored by this one. It is almost 2.5 hours long at 148 minutes, and it is a weird one. But I think there's a lot of really valuable stuff in there, really thoughtful stuff in there. So if there's something in that description that sounds interesting to you, maybe consider it. I said it feels like a marriage of Stephen Sondheim musicals and Ruben Ostlund class satire comedies. I liked it a lot. I don't know. We'll see if I'm just the crazy outlier, but there are dozens of us that like this.
I'll add on to that
Dozens.
because I was in the theater for that, and I thought at first I was between like it was solid, it was okay, but after I gave it 2 or 3 days and I saw more movies, I'm like, nah, the end is pretty good. You know, like the performances, everyone, like you mentioned, is on the top of their game. George McKay really blew me away a lot. I thought he's fantastic in the movie.
I know you liked that windmill move.
I love the windmill move, man. When everyone sees the windmill move later, I was so happy he did it a second time because the first time took me out. I was like, this is crazy that he's pulling this off. He was great. Tilda Swinton's always great. Michael Shannon's always great, but they're all great. You know, it's a great ensemble. I do think I kind of wish they did a little bit more with the idea. Like it kind of hit the beats I expected it to, but at the same time, like the music's pretty good. The performances are pretty good. The conflict is pretty good. The dinner scene, we're all a sucker for a good dinner scene. It's pretty good. You know, it's just pretty good movie. And to see Joshua Oppenheimer transition from the documentary work to English feature film musical is pretty impressive. So give my hat off to him for sure.
Absolutely. All right. So The End, I have it at number 6. Chase, what's your number 5?
Yeah, my number 5 is not going to be on either of your lists because this was a Sundance movie for you, and it was my first TIFF movie ever. So I saw Presence from Steven Soderbergh. So if you are unaware of what this movie is, the trailer actually just came out. It is following the perspective of the ghost, literally, because the camera is the ghost in the movie. So this new family moves in, and it kind of hits the beats you would expect it to in the beginning, and then it slowly devolves into a bunch of different little things, and you just happen to be the ghost. And I've missed a lot of the Steven Soderbergh gimmicky type movies. I know a lot of people don't like using the word gimmick, but you know, he's shot on iPhones and done a bunch of weird stuff. And this convinced me to go back and check out a lot of those because I thought this was really damn good. And when I first walked out, I thought it was a good movie. And I interpreted one thing, and we all got breakfast. We all talked about our first movie. Yeah. And you both said, oh, what did you think of this thing at the end? And I was like, oh, yeah, like that was cool. And it went over my head. I was like, oh, no, it's okay. And then I started connecting things. And it's the more you think about it, the more I love a movie that's rewatchable when you could see things that are probably planted in the beginning that you didn't pick up on. So I'm really excited to see this again. It's not really a horror movie if you're expecting ghost haunted house. It's more family drama / coming of age / like paranormal. It's a lot of things in the movie.
It's a little creepy and a little unsettling, but there's no boo, it's a ghost kind of moments. You're not gonna I don't think you're gonna have nightmares about this movie, but you're gonna think about it.
For sure. And it's closer to a ghost story than it is any horror movie, for sure.
Yeah. That's a pretty good comparison because it is similar to a ghost story in the sense that it is kind of this like experiential thing. Like you're not really getting the full story, you're just sort of getting these little slivers. And you talk about the gimmicky experimental nature of this and a lot of Soderbergh's recent work. Like it's got obvious sort of limitations on what it's doing that I could see some people bumping up against, but I think it just explores the idea to the fullest and really gives you a very, very unique take on this kind of story with a lot of really novel little moments. Like there's just little quirks to how they assembled this that are unlike anything I've seen in a ghost story. And it really just stuck with me. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff in this movie.
And it has a song by the band Basement.
Extra half star.
Big wins all around.
This is one that got the extra half star for me like 24 hours later.
Good.
I will say, I think the film kind of sets up 3 ways it could go, and it goes the way I would least want it to go based off one particular performance. But it's such a nitpick because I think the ending does a good job of wrapping around to everything. So, overall, I walked out of the movie saying it was good. The more I thought about it, I guess repeating myself, I've thought about this movie more than a lot of the movies I saw at TIFF, and it was the first one I saw. So
there you go.
Yeah, I definitely recommend everyone checking it out. And I guess it's my favorite movie of 2025 so far because it's really solid.
You're right. January 17th, 2025, I believe.
I think so.
Not terribly far, but a little further than I'd like, at least. Okay, Chase, that was your number 5. Presence. Amanda, did you have Relay at number 5?
No,
You had that
mine
at
was
6.
6. So
So
my
what's number
5.
5 on your list?
I think it's going to be higher up on Chase's, but we'll just see where it lands. I think as of right now, I have Heretic at number 5.
Cool.
It
We
is
can hold
higher.
off on that.
Okay.
Hold
because,
on. There's a few movies
anticipate
here.
that's
This is
higher.
where a lot of them are starting to jump around.
Yeah, we're
again,
gonna.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna get some overlap for the rest of this list. But
Probably.
number 5 for me was Relay, so we are going back to Chase for his number 4.
Back to me again.
Mhm.
Man, I don't know if this is going to be on. I don't think Amanda saw this. I'm not sure if this is going to be on Zach's list, but I have The Fire Inside, which I was
Nice.
really high on coming out of it.
Honorable mention for me.
Okay, there we go. So I'm excited to talk about it because I was kind of on a streak of a lot of 3-star movies for me, of which a 3-star movie any day of the week is a good day for me. It's like, okay, I got to see a good movie. But when you see a bunch of them in a row, you're like, I want something a little more. And maybe that's part of the reason I was so high on this. But at the same time, I think Rachel Morrison, who I didn't realize until a couple days ago is the first woman to ever be nominated for Best Cinematographer. Like, that's crazy. And she definitely deserves a lot of respect for that, because obviously her work with Ryan Coogler and all that has already been impressive. But cinematographers, I can feel like, go either way when they transition into actually directing a movie. Like, I know that Pedro Palermo movie did not get the hottest reviews at TIFF. I did not see it, but I think Rachel does an excellent job with this, which follows the story of Clarissa Shields, who is an Olympic boxer, a very young Olympic boxer at that. The film was written by Barry Jenkins, and me and Zach were at the same screening. Turns out it was written before he even wrote Moonlight. It was when he was really trying to get some work, and they've been trying to make this movie for a while. And it is, so I am a sucker for a good sports movie. You know, it doesn't have to be the most incredible. It doesn't have to be Raging Bull where it's diving too deep into different things. But I think what The Fire Inside does really good is it delivers on the basic boxing story that you would want. I swear to God, the guy next to me in the final fight is going like this next to me, like dodging the punches, like he was so into it. So I think it delivers on that part of the movie. But without going into too much, it reminds me a little bit of Foxcatcher too, where it goes beyond just the sport. It goes into the life of an athlete before and after something like an Olympic trial. So I am really high on this. I think Ryan Destiny gives a great performance as Clarissa. Brian Tyree Henry, it's no surprise that he's good in the movie, but he's really good in the movie. I liked him a lot. For what it's worth, this is the only movie at TIFF that made me shed a tear. I was crying at a certain part of it. I think it's the movie, like Unstoppable was another movie that came out that was solid, but this is just by far the best sports movie I've seen this year. And I'm curious to see how it lands, because I know Amazon and MGM have it. Don't know if it's going to get a theatrical push. Don't know if it's going to get any awards buzz at all.
Supposedly it will be out by Christmas this year. So that does mean it is qualifying at least for the Oscars. How much of a push we'll see, but like I'm in agreement with you. Movie. Yeah, I think it's a great movie you could take the family to. It's rousing, it's inspirational, and there's also like a lot of thought to it. I agree with you in that, like, it totally delivers on that boxing movie, overcoming the odds to become a champion thing that I think you kind of expect when you just read the log line of something like this. But where the movie transcends and becomes something special is in showing you like the fuller picture of the story in that final act of the movie, and really like saying, okay, she's achieved her dreams, but now what? And, you know, leave it to people like Rachel Morrison and Barry Jenkins, who are really thoughtful filmmakers, to want to explore these things. And you put it in the hands of great actors, and it just becomes really inspirational and moving stuff. I agree. This is like one of the movies that I think is going to really, really stick with people. It definitely, it's hard to deny getting affected by it when you watch it. So I'm not surprised that this one brought a tear out of you. It's very emotional. Very good movie. All right. So The Fire Inside, that is Chase's number 4. I think we're at Amanda's number 4 now.
And I think this is going to be higher too. This is where I have Friendship. So
cool. It's showing up a little higher on mine.
I think it's your 1, isn't it?
I think it is my 1. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We can save it then. We can save it.
We'll save it.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? screw it. Let's talk about friendship. Let's do it now.
Okay.
Let's get.
Are you
let's-
sure?
Yeah,
All right.
let's do it.
It's just great. Like it ends up kind of being you sometimes you say things, it's like a series of this to a narrative, and that's bad. This is like a series of I think you should leave skits put to a narrative, but it works. It's like in a great way. It doesn't feel unnatural. It doesn't feel like they are just trying to do bit to bit. It works in a narrative structure of how you get from thing to thing where people are going. It's so incredibly funny. Tim Robinson just has a way with his face that's so funny. So I know this wasn't written by him, but it feels like it was written for him. And I don't know how much of it was improv. I assume there has to be a lot of improv. The only thing I knew going into this was during the intro, they let us know this was all kind of based on Andrew DeYoung, the director and writer, basically being like, I was working a job, left the job, tried to hang out with someone I used to work with, and found out that like they didn't actually ever want to be my friend. That was just like a thing that we talked while we were at work, but now that we're in different areas, the dude had no interest in talking to him anymore. And I think that makes for a great kickoff for a movie. There's actually moments in this where you almost think, I guess I won't even say that, but it's just very funny what it does, and just that way that even in the skits for I think you should leave, that Tim Robinson always just pushes things one step further. It does that here, and never in a way that gets annoying, because I get really easily annoyed if things feel like they're too obvious and just keep going and going and going, and I just get so annoyed. This always toes the line. Yeah.
It's I think something really great about it is that like it's just so full of bits and so full of gags, and it will just very quickly move from one to the next. It's not really belaboring any of them too much to the point where you get tired of them. And it's like it's got this very thin story, but it's just enough that it's not like plotless. It connects everything together, and the film flows. It stays really interesting. Something else that I want to shout out, because like it's a Tim Robinson comedy. It's obviously funny. Like even the things that don't feel like jokes, like him just wanting to try the SEAL Team 6 special, which is the meal that they ate after killing Osama bin Laden. Like he just has a way of delivering them that it's so funny. But I also think what's something that's really cool about this film is it's shot really well. Like it looks like a movie. It doesn't look like an Apatow movie where they just kind of set up cameras both ways. Like there's some interesting camera movements, that there's some texture and grain to it. Like it kind of, I don't know, it just actually works. I think this is like maybe a bit underrated, because it's just like really hysterical and pretty like fun, surprising, and it just doesn't, it sticks out a bit in a way, and that Tim Robbins has found a way to translate that humor into this type of feature. I think is pretty awesome. Chase, you also responded to Friendship.
Yeah, and I think I should note too that my friend Jake has been trying to put me on I Think You Should Leave for like 2 years now, and he showed me a couple clips, and I just didn't really get it or find it that funny at first. It's a
particular sense of humor.
Yeah, but I knew I wanted to check this out because everyone was saying it was so funny, and I think I got the best experience possible. I sat next to two guys that have clearly been friends for years, and we're super excited to see the new Tim Robinson movie. And but like 10 seconds before the joke would even come out, they were already giggling because they're looking at his face.
You can see his face, then you're like, it's coming. It's coming. That was a great screening. Like that.
It was a great screening. Yeah.
That was like a midnight light screening. It was very good.
For sure. And I think I did get lucky in that sense that I got the best possible way to watch this movie. But it sold me. I watched some I Think You Should Leave with Jake and my friend Adam when I got back, because this movie cracked me up. The whole, like, I so needed a movie to laugh. And I'm one of these people, like, I love a drama that has comedy, you know what I mean? I love like the indie comedy things, but we're so in desperate need of the classic late 2000s, early 2000s, just funny movies. And Friendship delivers on that for me. It has one of the best drug tripping sequences I've ever seen.
One of the only one I like.
So funny.
Yeah.
Traditionally,
it's so good.
I hate trip scenes. It's so good. It's so good.
I needed to see a movie like this while I was there, and it's definitely one I'm super excited to see with a bunch of people that haven't seen it yet. I can't wait I hope Tim Robinson keeps making movies like these. And Paul Rudd was solid. I did want him to be maybe a bit funnier, honestly, but It doesn't matter because Tim Robinson just holds this thing down.
I kind of like that he made way for Tim to be Tim. So he kind of was more of the subdued character, but he's really good in it. He's what he needs to be. I like that it didn't feel like it was two big personalities battling.
Yeah, ASAC reviews put it in the live stream. Feel like I only hear about Tim, which I love, but how is Paul Rudd in it? And Paul is very funny. I think Paul is sort of in kind of like a almost Anchorman-ish mode because he's got a little bit of like cool guy, not really affected by stuff going on with his character. But like the photo from the movie, which is an image of him and Tim Robinson, makes you feel like maybe it's going to be a two-hander. This is a Tim Robinson comedy that Paul Rudd is also a character in. Paul Rudd's great in it, but it is really a showcase for Tim Robinson first and foremost. And a hilarious one at that. So Chase is number 7, Amanda's number 4. I think it's the best movie I saw at TIFF, honestly.
Hell yeah,
so
brother.
I'm putting it number 1. My number 4, though, is going to be Conclave. I have a feeling we're going to talk about this again.
Well, it's my number 3, so you could start talking about it.
Amanda, you got it on your list or no?
It's in my number 2 right now, but it could move around. So we can talk about it now.
Yeah, let's talk about it now. My number 4, Chase's number 3, Amanda's number 2, the new film from Edward Berger, who previously brought us All Quiet on the Western Front, which got a bunch of Oscar nominations for Netflix. This is a very different movie in some senses, but it has a lot of that like edge of your seat suspense that you got from his previous film. This one is a adaptation of a book of the same name that tells the story of this papal conclave of cardinals who come together to pick the next pope after the previous pope dies. And the way it unfolds is full of backstabbing and gossip and all sorts of interpersonal treachery. Amanda, you have this the highest out of any of us. What did you respond to in Conclave?
I was hoping it was going to be good, but I just don't feel like there's a moment of this movie that isn't hitting. I've been joking, but it feels very serious that like this is Ralph Fiennes having his Ned Stark outing where he's finding out these things he really doesn't want to know, but feels the utmost responsibility to actually deal with. And other people are also looking to him to deal with it. And there's so many ways it could go wrong. There's so many ways it could blow up for him.
Was Ned the hand of the king? Because this is a very hand of the king type of role.
Yes, so he was hand of the king. He didn't want it, and that was the whole thing. And they all moved there, and then all that stuff happens for that incredible first season. So it really feels like that. This was the hand of the Pope. The Pope then dies, and this man is kind of left to put together the pieces as people are drifting out information and kind of wondering, why did it take people so long to call me and this other person here? What's going on? And then having to try to navigate all the stuff happening while all of these different cardinals are coming in from literally every church from around the world to try to figure out who the new pope is going to be. So, and they literally are getting locked into separate rooms. They're not allowed going outside. They're not allowed interacting with things. And he even has like the honor that when he can find out information from someone, he keeps saying, I don't want to know. We're going to do this right. So I just think it's such a strong movie, great performances from everyone in here, a really strong ending that, again, I think is losing some people who are taking it in a weird way. I don't know. People are weird and everybody wants to be angry about things, but I was just, I thought it was super fun movie. Way more fun than I thought it was going to be for how exhilarating it is.
Right, because there's like a seriousness to the tone, but there's also a bit of humor in it, a bit of like surprise and elements that are meant to kind of take you, like throw you off your guard. It's got this sort of House of Cards-ish energy in that it's a lot of the politicking behind the scenes and just sort of seeing that play out against a backdrop of like popes and nuns, or I should say cardinals and nuns and stuff. It just sort of feels sort of funny in an out of place way, although I'm sure this is probably truer than we want to admit. Chase, what did he respond to in Conclave?
Yeah, I know a lot of people didn't really like the new All Quiet on the Western Front. I really liked it. I thought it was really well directed and a ton of great sequences. I didn't expect the Pope voting movie to
I
be
know,
more
right?
intense, but he
That's
pulls
what I'm
it.
saying.
He pulls it off. Me and Zach were talking about this as soon as we got out. I think what I didn't want Conclave to be was the Best Picture nominee / potential winner that people say is like a Green Book or a King's Speech, where it's an important movie about an important thing, but it's kind of boring. Conclave could have easily been that movie, the way it's set up, but they do such a good job at making you locked in from the first minute. The score does something similar that people complain about All Quiet on the Western Front, where it's kind of repetitive. It is, but I don't care because it's so good. Like every time it played, I was like, oh shit, like the Cardinals are about to throw it down. This is crazy. And I'm a sucker for like a Game of Thrones or House of Cards when it was good, politic type of thing. And this just hit everything I wanted to. Me and Zach also talked about, I think the one thing holding this back from being the definitive favorite movie of the year for me is that every scene is great, but it feels like it is missing one more amazing scene to really lock it in as like, this is the movie of the year.
I can see that.
It might bore a couple people. I naturally find something like this interesting, and I find it crazy how this is something we probably could have had a movie about already, and it could have been, like I said, super boring. But Edward Berger absolutely annihilated this. I want to see this again. I keep telling everybody, the movie where they vote for a new pope is by far one of the most fun movies of the year. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, and our complaints are mostly like nitpicks and things that prevent us from giving it like a full 5 or 4.5 stars. But like we both really enjoyed this one, and as you mentioned, like it's not a film that's leaning towards the self-serious and the ponderous. It has interesting themes in it, but it is ultimately it's suspense thriller, and it's very entertaining
for sure.
So Conclave, I got this one at number 4 on my list.
It was my 3. So
Chase's 3, Amanda's 2. I guess we're back to Amanda for her number 3.
My number 3, I'm gonna go with The Substance. I think I was the only person you've all seen it by now, but I'm the only one who saw it at the festival.
Yeah, it would have made my list if I saw it there, because I saw it last
what I
night.
mean. So. Everything except my number 1 spot for these like final 5 are very interchangeable to me. But I'm going with The Substance here because for me, I think the movie actually peaks probably like one scene before the ending. But while I do love the ending and I love that it like commits, this is like a body horror through and through. This is doing every type of body horror you could really imagine in a way that feels like it fits the narrative. And I do feel like there's just some like inner meanings to things that are going on there that some of it feels very like in your face. It's not trying to be subtle at all, which I'm totally fine with, but there is just some layers there that we were kind of talking about a little bit before with Arturo, that like the peeling back the layers and things that some people are having issues with are kind of like the point of like the her being so internal, like misogynistic towards herself is kind of the point. So I guess I'm just rambling without really saying what it is. It is a movie where a woman undergoes an extreme cosmetic surgery and attempts to kind of like maintain her career and be this better version of herself that she feels is slipping away. And it's very much pointing out the standard changes of women versus men in these positions, and who's allowed to just kind of continue thriving and who has to try to do what is clearly pretty intense, as you can tell by the poster here. What I like about the movie as well is that it kind of lets you know right from the beginning if it's something that you're actually going to be able to handle watching. It doesn't shy away from the gruesomeness early on, like and if that's something you can't handle right from the get-go, it's kind of the sign that like, okay, maybe I will leave, but I think you should stay. I don't think it gets to an area where it's like gratuitously gross. It doesn't feel like gore porn of back in the day. It just feels like something that I've really only seen from, Coralie and the Titan director, whose name is escaping me right now.
Is that Julia Ducournau?
Yeah, Ducournau. Yeah, so it just kind of has that vibe of these women that are going very extreme with their filmmaking, and it really works because they're committing to it. They are presenting an idea that's in a lot of things, but in a way you've never seen before, and they don't shy away from anything. This is just a movie that once it starts going, it never lets up, and it just goes. Incredible performance out of Demi Moore, incredible performance out of Margaret Qualley. I would probably say this is the best thing I've ever seen Demi Moore in, at least like her performance. I think this is probably the best performance of her career because of how far she needs to go in so many different areas and how relatable so much of what she goes through. Like there's this scene where she's supposed to be meeting up with someone and she can't stop going back to the mirror to check all these things. And I know that that's something so many people are going to relate to, and just these nitpicking, all these small minor details.
And that's the thing also about this movie is like you mentioned all the really gnarly body horror, and there is a lot of gnarly body horror in this movie, body horror that like gets under your skin in a particular way because sorry for the pun, but it is about kind of getting under your skin and like seeing these transformations and stuff like that. But ultimately, I think the things that are the most like viscerally upsetting about this movie are those moments like that, where it's like you can feel the anxiety of like picking apart at your looks. Or I love this one moment involving Margaret Qualley's character where everybody's just sort of zooming in on an aspect of her, and like you have this visceral thing like please don't perceive me, please don't look at me this closely. But I think the film just does a really great job of evoking those fears we have around being perceived in the wrong way or looked at and looked at in lights that are unflattering. And so even if it's not necessarily like about like these ideas of vanity, even if there is a lot of that in there, I think it's deeper than just vanity. It's about feeling comfortable as yourself, the way that you navigate the world. And a lot of it is really ultimately about the female experience, but I think it's really interesting that the person who she kind of gets introduced through this through is a man who's also gone under this treatment, right? It's like we're not immune to that self-dissection either.
No.
Ultimately though, like this is so focused on the way that women's looks are hyper scrutinized, particularly in the entertainment industry, and it does such a good job of sort of just giving you that really visceral horror of it, the grotesque nature of it too, because there is something grotesque even in just the things we do to kind of maintain and preserve our looks. And I don't know, I thought it was extremely effective, even if the overall arc that her character goes on might be a bit predictable. It's just the ways that it happens that constantly surprise you with how gross or outlandish they're willing to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Chase, you enjoyed it too?
Yeah, I saw it last night, not at TIFF, at my local movie theater, and it had a mix of reactions that I miss seeing in movies. A lot of people thought they were just going to get a straight up horror movie. Some people, I guess, didn't find it funny. The couple next to me and my girlfriend said, "You guys made the movie for us because we couldn't stop laughing." I've never heard my girlfriend laugh that hard at anything, so not even my stupid jokes. So I'll take that for what you will. The substance is absolutely a fun time. Would have made my list. I don't want to spoil it because I know
it's hard,
but I think I kind of agree with Amanda, and I think we can read each other's minds where the same part of the movie kind of peaks.
Yeah.
And then more happens, and it
fits still good.
What you're going for. It's still good. But that part before it, I was like, man, if it ended right here, that is the biggest high you could end on. I agree. I think Demi Moore's fantastic in this. I know the Oscars don't really recognize horror performances as much. This is a pretty damn good one though. And it feels like the lead actress category is starting to become the most stacked this year, which is awesome to see, but I don't think it'll happen. I would love to see her get some sort of nom for this because she is incredible in this. Has asked to do a lot. So
her performance in Striptease will always be meaningful to me, but this is probably the best we've ever seen her in a film for sure. It is a really, really singular movie. I feel like the people who are bringing up Cronenberg are definitely spot on. Like I get a lot of The Fly from this movie, but it is its own really unique perspective and really cool. This is one that obviously is out in theaters now, starting to roll out into more places. So keep your eyes peeled for it. It's definitely going to be one of the movies of the year for sure. So that was Amanda's number 3. And we're back to me for my number 3, which I think I'm the only one that's going to have Babygirl on their list.
Yes.
We talked about it a little bit during the TIFF recap, so I won't say too much about it, but I think it's a really compelling sexual thriller that has a lot of it's really suspenseful. It's really kind of alluring. I think it's just really interesting. I think the dynamic between Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson in their roles is really fascinating. And ultimately, I think it's just this movie about communication and the ways that we feel entitled and not entitled to certain forms of communication, the shame we have around expressing sometimes our inner desires. And I think there's a lot of really interesting elements there. But most of all, I just had a lot of fun watching this one. And it is coming out later this year. Another one that I think is slated to be a Christmas release. Maybe not one to bring the whole family to, but maybe something to bring your significant other to. Babygirl. I enjoyed this one. I have it at number 3 on my list.
Nice.
Chase, did you ultimately come out positive or negative on it?
I came out positive. I was going to say, I'm glad somebody mentioned it because, again, I have a list of 15 movies going for the 11th spot.
Yeah.
And this is another one. I overall enjoyed Babygirl. I'm going to be the one freak, I guess, that says that. I kind of wanted to go a little further than it did.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I think it's solid, but I kind of wish there was one more draft of a couple more things that they could have added on. And maybe it's also because I'm a pretty big fan of Bodies. I thought that movie was a ton of fun, and they're very different. It's not like they're the same kind of movie at all. But yeah, Nicole Kidman's great. I've been on Harris Dickinson, however you pronounce his last name, since Beach Rats. Once I saw that movie, I was like, this guy's a star. And
I just found out that Harris Dickinson fans call themselves dickheads.
I like that. I like that. That is a nickname I could get behind.
I like him.
For sure.
I like him. I didn't like how a lot of his character was written in this, and it's not a him thing. It's what they asked him to do that made it feel weird to me. Oh, I'm gonna watch it again. I keep talking about it like I hate it, but I'm probably where Chase is. I'm probably like a 3 or a 2.5, I'd say, like in terms of like I haven't given it the star rating, but that's probably where I'd land because like I enjoyed it and there's so many scenes that work so well. It's just that like how it all comes together as a movie, so many moments felt like they just were too awkward and not flowing enough for me. Some things just felt too abrupt. And it's just how it's what they were asking Harris Dickinson to do. And there's no real way around that because that's what we have in the movie. Right. Yeah, it's interesting, but it's definitely worth watching.
And also Antonio Banderas is
oh my God. He's a king in this.
I didn't even know he was in it until
he's started, actually my highlight of the movie. I think he's the best. I think he's the best in the movie.
It is also like a really smart bit of casting, and I think Colleen Rain talked to us about this a little bit in the Q&A, but like the movie is very different if you cast some kind of like schlubby dude, even like a Scoot McNairy or something like that in that role versus like international sex icon Antonio Banderas.
Who was like aging very well, you know? Yes. So like they went really age appropriate with that marriage, but it's, you know, everybody knows who he is. That's like, you kind of need him. You need a Brad Pitt. You need someone like that who's been some kind of symbol to make it work as well as it does. And yeah, so there's a lot it does really, really well.
Nice. All right, so I got Babygirl at number 3 on my list. Chase.
We could probably skip my 2 because I'm 99% sure it's Amanda's 1. So if we want to go back to Zach's 2.
Chase's number 2. We'll find out. Amanda's number 2 was Conclave.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so let's talk about my number 2 briefly. Don't know if either of you ever got around to this one, but I have Sketch as my number 2.
No, I hear it's cute.
Damn.
And you kept pitching it to us.
Yeah, it's really delightful. This is one that I feel like is probably the most ignored great movie out of TIFF. I think this is like a genuinely awesome kids film. It feels like, you know, like the radical cousin of Harold in the Purple Crayon or something. This is a story about a family that is sort of dealing with the death of the mother and what happens when the young girl in the family, her like creepy drawings start to come to life. And it is so imaginative, so creative, so full of these like really crazy creations. A movie that came out earlier this year, If, the John Krasinski movie, one of my biggest qualms with it is I felt like the character designs themselves of these imaginary friends were just not imaginative at all, and not the kind of things that a kid would sketch in their sketchbook, like a talking glass of water. What the hell is that? These are all like very childlike, very free, very unencumbered by like the way that society programs you. It really does feel like it's been birthed from a child's brain in a lot of ways, but it's also got this really heartfelt family dynamic where they're struggling and kind of being prickly with each other in the wake of this death that's rocked their family. But like there's a lot of heart to it. You have Tony Hale, who has been a legend on TV for years, but is so funny here as the kind of like put upon dad who's had to deal with a lot but hasn't yet dealt with his own emotions. Darcy Carden, whom I love, also it shows up here as the aunt who is trying to help them get over things as well. Mostly though, it's just like a really fun time, and I think it's the kind of thing that will be a really fun film for the whole family. There's like a little bit of cursing in there. They say bastard and ass and stuff like that, but it's the kind of thing where it's like it'll probably be PG-13, but it's acceptable for anybody who's like 7 years or older. And I think it would like be an absolute hit. If this hopefully ends up somewhere better than this, but if this is like a Disney Plus original or whatever, it'd be like the best Disney Plus original of all time.
Okay.
I really, really had a lot of fun with this one from writer-director Seth Worley, who I think is making their debut with it. I just hope this one doesn't get too overlooked because it's a really sweet, really fun movie.
Yeah, you and Caitlin were high on it when you came out. You guys were like, this is by far, as of now, the best movie we saw. So
yeah,
I tried to fit in. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, the little Letterboxd intro description says it's reminiscent of things like Gremlins, Jumanji, and The Goonies, and those are all really apt comparisons.
Oh, nice.
I feel like it's a great family adventure.
Awesome.
Sick.
Nice. So I got Sketch at number 2, and I also had Friendship at number 1. So I'm done. I don't have to talk about any more movies. But before we get to Chase's number 1 and his number 2 and Amanda's number 1, I don't feel like I can let Chase off this podcast without getting his thoughts on the new Francis Ford Coppola film, Megalopolis, which did not appear on any of our top 10s. Now I have
this is my number 2 and Amanda's number 1. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right, I don't know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm making a full video on this. So it's like a rant. That's not even a full video. I mean, so let me preface this by saying I am a Francis Ford Coppola fan, like a lot of people. He made The Godfather. Like he's a pretty smart guy, I would say. And it's a couple
issues.
Yeah, he's got a couple issues, but I would say he's an intelligent filmmaker, and he earns his spot in the history of filmmaking.
He's inarguable classics, a couple of inarguably greatest films of all time.
Yes, absolutely.
For sure. And going into the festival, Megalopolis was my most anticipated. I had heard all the mixed stuff from Khan, and like I mentioned earlier,
who warned us about this way back in May.
But it's like you don't understand, because I felt the same as Chase, in that the more people were saying it was bad, the more excited I was just to see what it was actually going to be.
Me too.
And that's how
100%.
Everybody else is taking my unhingedness, but we cannot stress enough how bad this is. Continue, Chase, continue.
No worries. Go. So you saw it the day before me, and you were like, fuck this movie. And I was like, yeah, but I have to see it. Like, I'm so excited. And we notoriously disagree on a couple of my favorite movies. You know, like I love Beau is Afraid. You hate Beau is Afraid. You know, that's a whole discussion for another time. So I went in thinking, you know what? I still have to see this because look at that Letterboxd curve. It's all across the board. I would have felt the same.
I would have felt the same.
It's a movie you have to see until you see it. And you're like, what the fuck is going on here? Everyone has their own opinion. I will encourage you to see a movie that you want to see and form your own opinion. I cannot fathom how this average is not above a 1.5. Like, it's fucking bananas that people enjoy this movie. It is and Amanda has said it again. the only comparison I could possibly think of is The Room. Like that, the first 5 minutes is kind of dumb, but it's like Matrixy, and I'm like, okay, like we'll see where this goes. And as soon as Shia LaBeouf opens his mouth, I thought, oh my fucking God, this is what the movie is. This can't be happening. And then for 2 hours, it just spirals. And again, to get real personal, I had a lot of shit going on, and I was pretty tired, but I start fucking disassociating out of every scene of this movie because it just gets so ridiculous and bad in every single scene. And that they just start talking, and they'll say the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard, and you're like, you're Adam Driver, you're a good actor, why are you delivering it like this? And then it'll go to Shia LaBeouf, and then they'll go to Aubrey Plaza, whatever her name is, and you're like, Aubrey, sorry. It's just like, okay, what are we trying to do here? And then it tries to introduce something, and you're like, oh, the statues are moving, that's kind of cool.
That was the only good scene. That was it.
And then it shows an arena, and you're like, okay, maybe something cool is going to happen.
No, because then the fucking America's Got Talent girl, the fucking America's Got Talent girl descends from the goddamn ceiling. And that's what we're doing. We're singing a song about virgins. Not virgins, plural.
And she has a dress that you could see through for whatever reason, because that's the technology going on. And Adam Driver makes a bad joke, and then he's doing this out of nowhere, and you're like, why are we doing this? And it's got the worst music from Artlist. That's like the goofy comedy stock music, just put at the bottom of the track. And then it got to the point where I'm sitting there and I'm questioning my entire life, Zach. I'm like, what the hell are we doing here? This is the worst movie I have possibly ever seen. It is so incomprehensibly bad. And I was starting to freak out. I was having a panic attack. I was like, I can't keep doing this. So I'm checking my watch. I know it's like a 2 hour, 20-ish minute movie. I think it's 2 hours, 1 minute, 2 hours, 2 minutes. And I'm like, all right, I just got to focus on something and stop panicking. Then you focus on the movie. It's the worst thing you've ever seen. And you're like, I can't do this. So I started to walk out. I had to take a break. I asked the lady how much time is left. She said 15 minutes. I said, you know what? Fuck this movie. Fuck Francis Ford Coppola. I love you. You made The Godfather. I understand why no one wanted to buy this movie the entire time. I know people are going to be more excited to see it. I am telling you right now, even the thing that you've heard is a spoiler that the movie does that's interesting. Even that aspect of the movie is disappointing. I thought it was going to be so much better than it was.
Because that's what I was waiting for. I did almost walk out, and I was like, well, I got to wait for that. And then it happens, and I was like, that was so lame. And then I'm like, well, surely there can't be that much longer of the movie left. It felt like another solid hour. I think it was only 30 minutes, but it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. In the worst way. Again, I'm not exaggerating when I say the last time I felt that trapped and uncomfortable in a movie theater was Cats. And Cats is literally dog shit. So
I haven't seen Cats, so I can't compare, but
the only way I could imagine anybody finding joy in Megalopolis is pirating it and that watching it at home with friends. Because where you have to be able to scream, you have to be able to yell at what's happening on the screen, because that's probably the only way that Cats is fun too. You can't be sitting in a theater where everybody's expecting to just sit and watch this miserable piece of shit for 2 hours and 18 minutes.
Based on some of those early tracking numbers, you might be able to get a theater to yourself. It does not seem like the tickets are going that hot.
They were giving them away. People don't even want them for free. I don't think movie theaters should be able to do that shit. I actually don't think, like, the last time they were mass giving out tickets was for The Flash. And that's a better movie than this. I'll take The Flash any day of the week.
It's like the Sound of Freedom, pay it forward system or something.
I haven't seen Sound of Freedom, but I bet your ass it's better than this movie.
Against all advice and maybe my better judgment, I'm still kind of excited to see this one on the 23rd.
I understand, because I was that
I get
person.
it. I get it. And that's the thing. And that's why I'm trying to encourage people to just like watch it at home.
Yeah.
And I get that you don't want it, or at a film festival. It has to be like, you have to have the full experience, or you have to have the at-home experience, because this is like, it was really stressful. It's a really stressful movie to watch while your brain is like, I get what you're going for, but you're doing it so dumb. It's like, cool, you like Shakespeare, you like ancient Rome, you believe in America. I bet $120 million could have done a lot for America that isn't this movie. So,
and my brain was working kind of the same way, except instead of thinking, I see what you're going for here and it's dumb, I was like, what is this dialogue?
Most of it's that. It's just piecing together the like, oh, I get what it's New Rome. They all have these names. It's a lot of Shakespearean dialogue. but not act. But yeah, no, there is actually a scene where they start reciting Shakespeare. Never mind. It is both literally and figuratively Shakespearean dialogue. It's just a fucking mess. It's literally the ramblings of it. It feels like, I don't think he has dementia, but it feels like it.
I feel like I had dementia after the movie because we walked out and me and Amanda, we were the only two people at a table waiting for you guys or something. And I was like, hey, while they're not here, like, what is the last 15 minutes? And she's breaking down things and she's like, yeah, this thing happens. There's a boner joke and something wild happens. I'm like, that's crazy. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, no, I saw that scene. Like, I could not. A random, like, you would remember it.
Yeah, you said the last thing you remembered. I was like, Chase, that there was like 30 minutes left of the movie at that point. Like, you did not leave, you had way more than 15. And then I'm going, and he's like, oh, I do remember that happening. I do. Because it's like, it's all so inconsequential. Characters flip from moment to moment. It's so fucking bad.
Shout out to Arturo's animated twin, Let Me Explain, who says classic incoming.
It sure is.
It's gonna have that reaction. But again, I think there is a way to watch this, and it's probably screaming at it, wearing togas in your living room with a group of friends. I don't think there's a sincere way to engage with this movie. And most of the really positive reviews aren't even people saying they enjoy the movie itself. They just appreciate what it is. But
Amanda, if you think I pay $5.99 for it on VOD, will somebody burst into my living room to yell it out and drive her?
They might.
I hope. I fucking paid $100 to watch this movie.
Canadian.
Fuck off. That's $5. My money. $75.
So Megalopolis does not get the ringing endorsement out of TIFF.
No, there's another movie I know that everyone listening to this podcast is still going to watch it, and I hope you enjoy it.
The more I talk about it, the more people are like, you're selling me, and I'm like, fuck, I'm just not going to talk about it, and now I'm done. Until it's on VOD, I am done.
This was the same thing with like the Harmony Korine Aggro Drift movie, right? Where it's like there's no way to talk about it in a way that doesn't just make people more interested in seeing it, even though that was a disaster.
And that was still better than this somehow, and I did not like that either.
Yeah. Shout out to LaShawn,
who 80 minutes.
Is taking your warning and says,
LaShawn, time is precious. We don't have a lot of it, and you're making the right decision.
That was my biggest takeaway from that movie, is that my time is precious and life is too short to waste time on like a $120 million vanity project. There are so many better movies I could spend my time watching. There's so many better movies coming out around the time that's going to be in theaters that you can entertain yourself with. I can't. It's fucking, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
My life is worth more.
That we all thought maybe would be that level of bad, and then you came out a little bit more mixed than I expected. Was Eden, the new Ron Howard film?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They weren't showing us like any images from this, just an image of Ron Howard in like the marsh or something,
which I thought was a bad pick.
But this is a new movie that has a lot of hype around it, particularly because it's got Ana de Armas and Sydney Sweeney and Vanessa Kirby. Just a plethora of internet girlfriends, along with Jude Law, Daniel Bruhl, and Toby Wallace. What did you guys think about this one?
I think we kind of felt the same, but maybe through different points of the movie, that it was like pretty decent, but it like starts fumbling certain areas where it's trying to get deeper into characters. So it feels like a lot of built momentum that then just gets like squandered for a bit. And it does such a solid job with the setup that then by the time it gets interesting again, it just feels like too much time is kind of passed in an interim area. We had a very hectic screening, but it's a lot. I also think that Sydney Sweeney is kind of weak in this. I just don't think this is, I don't know. She's putting on an accent that she does not have. And it takes a while for my brain to like filter
I've
it.
never thought of Sydney Sweeney as somebody who should be doing a lot of accent work in movies, but maybe she'll prove me wrong at some point.
She nails the pregnant scream, though. No one can do the pregnant scream like Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah, the pregnant, like there's some weird shit happening when you're giving birth scream. Like that's all she can, not all, but that's like one of the things she really excels at.
Yeah, that's her corner.
Oddly enough, though, I do think her having the accent saves her from some of the issue. We kind of mentioned it a little bit with Rachel Sennett, who was fantastic in Saturday Night, but she does have such a Gen Z voice. I think Caitlin put it as that. It's just this and Sydney kind of has her own version of the Gen Z voice. Sydney Sweeney has a very interesting tenor to her voice, like the way she talks. Almost, it's weird. I feel like her vocal cords sound like there's like a hood over them, and it's like a little nasally, but not too nasally. It's just a little thing that just sounds very like it fits so well in Euphoria. And then when you start putting her in other things, it can feel awkward depending on what is required of the role. So I almost feel like her doing the accent got her out of sounding like she wouldn't have belonged in the time period at all. But when she starts talking, she's like the first person with like not lyrics, Jesus, words with lines. And I was like, whoa, oh no. Yeah. But it's fine. It wasn't like so distracting through the movie. It was consistent. Like it sounded the same throughout the whole thing. But she ends up feeling a little bit weak for how important her character is to the movie. I mean, I guess that's kind of the point, is someone who's very meek, kind of having to learn to stand up for herself a little bit more. It's a very hectic movie, basically, based on the real life story of a bunch of people going to the Galapagos Islands, based on the writings of Jude Law's character. I think Dr. Ritter is his last name, Dr. Ritter. And it kind of turned out that he was trying to make this like new philosophy. And while he claims he wasn't, he was definitely trying to build up the mythos of the Galapagos. But then once people did actually start coming over because of the work that he was doing, he didn't really like the reality of what that would be. So you had like Sweeney's family who felt they were genuinely there just to live better lives. And you have Ana de Armas coming in who wants to kind of like exploit the land. And her whole backstory is wild. And when you realize it's a real story and these people were real, it makes it kind of a degree more interesting, because she does seem like such a cartoonish character, but it totally makes sense that someone would do that and would have been able to pull it off back then. Very, is it Anna Sorkin, the one who just had her whole thing where she was pretending to be, she got arrested because she was pretending to be like super rich and famous? There's like a Netflix show about her. Is it Anna Sorkin?
Anna Delvey?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the one who was
Anna Sorokin is
Sorokin. Yeah, okay. So I wasn't far off. So it kind of has that vibe, but Ana de Armas is that character.
Interesting.
Yeah, some of it got a little annoying. It almost started hitting into the zones where I was like, I don't know if I can handle if it continues down this line too far. But it was an interesting movie. Like, it was better than I thought it was going to be. But I feel like the audience reacted way stronger to it than I expected.
Yeah, they reacted like it was an Avengers movie, and I'm like, these are real people.
My God, yeah.
Like, this is kind of bizarre. Yeah, I echo. It was funny because I don't know if we want to get into the story or not, what happened during the screening, but I'm sitting there. Amanda just happens because there's assigned seating with these movies, and Amanda's just 4 seats down. Yeah. And we're like, oh, what's up? Little do we know it's going to be for the craziest screening of our entire TIFF experience. So I'll start with the movie was okay overall. I was kind of into it in the beginning, and then someone in our screening started to pass out / we thought they were dying. Like,
right. I don't know if that was that moment.
It was kind of crazy.
It was crazy. It was really sad. Like, they were limp. It was like very concerning. And then it was just like, look behind me and some dude's laughing. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, this woman is literally being carried out of the building.
She looked like a hammock. Like, these two guys were just dragging her out. She looked gone. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was really, really concerning. And luckily there was a lot of doctors in the building that worked out. The person behind me was a doctor. And then it was just kind of interesting that we were like, man, people are being so disrespectful. And then like someone that I know was like, yeah, I had a crazy situation happen like this. They almost died at this. And I was like,
it was so much louder in a silent room though than when she's pitching. It was wild.
And I was like, damn. So I just kept being like, damn, I hope she's all right. I hope they handle it. It was very weird.
Like, this happened in Berlin. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And then someone that's pretty important at TIFF did the Q&A, and
Cameron Bailey, the CEO.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna name drop him, but
we don't want to get kicked out. We want to go.
Yeah, he pretty much came out and said sorry for the inconvenience that we had to pause the movie. And I'm thinking, you could say thank you for your patience or something. And then little Ron Howard was like, are they all right? Like,
yeah.
trying to figure
And
out
it's
the
like, to my
person's good.
understanding, they're going to be okay. And I found out we did not know at that time if they were going to be okay. We just
Yeah.
assumed. So I don't know. I feel like that was just lying to get the Q&A going.
And to tie that back into the movie, that was probably like our intermission. That was about halfway through, and the second half I wasn't as into. So yeah, I think Eden's okay. The true story itself is crazy,
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
crazy.
I think me and Amanda kind of agreed if it was edited in a different way or just shaved probably 20 minutes off of it, it could have been one of my favorites of the festival. But
absolutely,
it kind of just keeps dragging on after a while, and I was like,
it hits like a big peak moment and it keeps going, but then like what happens after that does start getting interesting again, but it just feels like they couldn't keep the momentum going in the correct way, which was annoying.
Yeah, only 2 hours long, but I guess it feels like maybe it goes on a bit longer than that.
It felt like 2.5 for me, at least.
Yeah. It felt long.
Yeah. A couple other quick movies that didn't make our top 10s, but I wanted to give a quick shout out to The Return is the new Umberto Pasolini film, which is partially notable because it is the first time that Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche have been in a film together since The English Patient. Obviously an iconic film there. This is the other Ralph Fiennes movie at TIFF aside from Conclave, and Conclave is probably a bit better. This one is still interesting, though. It's an adaptation of the Odyssey, or at least a section of the Odyssey that takes place after Odysseus washes up on the shores of Ithaca after the war has been fought. And, you know, in many ways, it's sort of just really focusing on the aftermath of a big struggle like this, after families have been torn apart and people have been gone for many years, and the pieces that remain of society in the wake of that. And I think it was a pretty interesting film in that it takes what is like a pretty epic historical story that I feel like can be kind of hard to connect to and really strips it down to its most bare essentials. You know, I think of the Odyssey as a film, as a story that talks about thousands upon thousands of characters and people. And this ultimately just becomes about like 10 to 15 people living on this island. And Penelope sort of waiting on a husband who's been gone for many years. And I think there's a lot that's interesting to it. It is a little bit, like PBS special-ish in that it's really sticking to the classics. But I think if you're curious about the story, but you never really felt like you had a way in, this was a pretty interesting way in for me, at least. I also thought the film Triumph was pretty interesting. This is a Bulgarian film, and it is a military satire about an operation launched shortly after the fall of communism that used psychics to try and make a connection to an alien civilization in order to bring glory to the nation of Bulgaria. Pretty silly. And you got Maria Bakalova at the center of this in what is her first Bulgarian speaking role since her breakout in Borat. She's very funny in this. This movie is very, very dryly funny, just in the way that it sort of highlights the absurdity of this sort of government initiated project to try and do something beyond the realm of human possibilities, but because they have this opportunity or something like that. I thought it was pretty funny, pretty well done. One that I think we all got to catch was Bring Them Down, which stars a couple of our film festival favorites in Barry Keoghan and Christopher Abbott, who are always reliable to bring a good performance into an independent film. Christopher Abbott speaking a lot of Gaelic in this movie, I was pretty impressed by. And this is like a pretty sad story about a couple families of sheep farmers that are squabbling in the Irish countrysides. Amanda, do you have any big reaction to Bring Them Down?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Also, I will just say, because I felt, I don't know. So it is his last name is in fact Keoghan. I know that a bunch of people
I always mix that up. Yeah.
Well, it's because people kept saying it's Keegan, and then he was like, "Nah, my family says Keoghan," and like someone had gotten on my case about that in a video, and I was like, "Fuck you." But so that's the only reason why I correct you. I thought it was great. It's very interesting that there was 2 movies this year, and I liked both of them, where Barry Keoghan plays very different ages. In this, he's very much a teenager, and in another one, he is like the father of teenagers, which I thought was an interesting dynamic, seeing those kind of back to back. But Bring Them Down was one I was really anticipating and people were really enjoying. And it really is it's just tragic. It's a big old tragedy. It has this feeling of just constant dread, but I love the way it's told, that it then kind of like it builds you through Christopher Abbott, and then it'll kind of go back in time to just like say what's happening from the other people's perspectives,
like Rashomonic in that structure.
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
different sides to the conflict.
Yeah, so you're seeing everything, and like the people that are getting caught in the crossfire and why it's happening, what's happening in this small town, how a lot of it seems to just go back to people being how people are. And some people just not wanting to change their ways. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely one I want to check again. I know you said your screening had a lot of walkouts, which I can understand. There is like a fair amount of animal violence in it, but it's really just showing the brutality and the animosity that can spring up between people that makes you want to just do something so horrible to reason it out. I really enjoyed it though. My screening did not have any walkouts. It was like a 9 a.m. screening, and people stayed. People were definitely horrified, but we stayed.
I mean, it's definitely not. I didn't assume it was walkouts because, and I'm not saying that you were saying this like because of quality. It is just like harrowing at certain points. So if you're not into like animal death as part of your movies, you might have a hard time with this one. But I think it does.
And I'm not
really good.
I
mean, I super love animal death. That's like what I'm looking for in a movie.
But I'm like that person that I'm Googling. To certain animals.
Did the dog die?
Movies. I'm the person who will I add the Sundance movies to Does the Dog Die, so that other people can be forewarned. But I stuck it out, even though I knew what was going to happen. And it's pretty damn horrific, but some really great performances here. Like, especially like a lot with Barry just being a very convincing teenager where they do something and then they realize that there's going to be the flip reaction to what you just did, the consequence of it. And the whimpering like, no, come on. And it's like, come on, dude, but you did this thing.
But I think it's a pretty effective depiction, sort of like these like cycles of violence and violence begetting other violence and just the devastation of that.
Absolutely.
JC, I think you felt similarly as well.
Yeah, again, one of the top 15 for the 11 spot. Like I didn't know what to expect going into this. I saw Christopher Abbott and Barry, and I thought, oh, it's going to be like a Banshees of Inisherin, like dark comedy buddy thing. It is anything but that, and I think it works. I think it's solid. It plays around with time in a really interesting way that I really liked. I always love when a movie does that, and it's. What I really like is just seeing these two guys. Well, Chris Rabbitt's been doing the indie thing for a while, but seeing Barry do stuff like this and Bird and not being afraid to just do the smaller movie that's fun or fun-ish. You know what I mean? Like, I really do appreciate seeing these guys doing that because it's super small budget, super simple idea. But I think when it gets going, it's really effective. And yeah, definitely had quite a few walkouts in me and Zach's screening for sure.
Let's talk briefly as well about a movie that's also in theaters now. I think it's starting to expand. Matt and Mara, which is the new film from Kajit Radvansky. It stars Matt Johnson and Derek Campbell. And it's a pretty interesting film. It's almost like a Canadian literary Before Sunrise or something. It is sort of the story of these two friends who haven't seen each other as much recently, and they're reconnecting over their shared kind of like creative stasis, if that's a good way of putting it. And it's also like about this sort of nebulous stage in your life where you're kind of not sure what your next thing should be. I thought this was a pretty compelling character study, had a lot of really good dialogue, feels very extemporaneous. I'm sure a bunch of it was kind of like improvised or loosely scripted, but I thought it was a pretty well told story. Amanda, you liked it as well?
I did, yeah. I'm a big fan of Matt Johnson comedy, but it really is so much of Dara's kind of like more silent and subdued performance that makes this as strong as it is. It's a nice, simple kind of slight comedy with some drama added in. And it works really well. It's a short runtime, which I think helps it a lot. But I really enjoyed it.
Definitely. I also would give a quick shout out to All of You, which is the, I believe, debut from director William Bridges, who did a little work on Black Mirror. And I feel like that's evident here because this is a story that is it's got sort of like a bit of like future technology implemented in it, and it revolves around the idea of this test that people can take to let them know who their soulmate is. Reminded us of Fingernails in a sense, although they're very different movies tonally. This is much more of like a ambient romantic comedy of sorts, more leaning on the dramatic romance between its two leads. Brett Goldstein, who you might recognize from Ted Lasso, as well as the more recent Thor movie, and Imogen Poots, who is quite delightful here. In fact, I think the movie really excels on the chemistry between these two. They really feel like old friends who have known each other for years, and the kind of loose dialogue between them is really fun. There's not a lot of like propulsion to the movie. It just sort of it's a vibe for a while. And what's sort of interesting is the way that they give you these little slivers, screen or shots in time, where you are filling in the pieces as to what's happened between their meetings, which is kind of interesting. The technological aspect of it is only barely in the story. It's just basically a gateway into exploring these ideas around fate and romance and true love and things like that. And I think it's all really compelling. I think it's really it's emotional and pretty funny. It's not one of my standouts from the festival, but I did think it's pretty strong. And if the idea sounds appealing, I would definitely consider putting that one on your watch list. One last one before we wrap things up with our best of the fest. But Amanda, should we give a shout out to Do I Know You From Somewhere?
Yeah, we should give a shout out to Do I Know You From Somewhere. Mildly biased. I'm friends with the people who made this movie, but I do think it's a very nice budget Canadian project that kind of deals in the what ifs in life, and how when you make any decision you make in your life is technically closing a door somewhere else. And some people really struggle with that. And the way you can kind of feel all those side doors and people disappearing and drifting out from you when you start making those more solidified choices going forward, and like kind of realizing you have to commit to those things and choosing what you want in life. So I was really moved by it. I've cried both times. I am someone who struggles with making decisions, especially bigger ones. Even smaller ones is a struggle. So I really enjoyed it, and I'm very excited to see what they do next.
Nice. Yeah, I'm very excited to catch that one. I know we sent along the link, so I'll report back with some thoughts on it. But you sold it well. I'm very curious to see it.
Thank you. Yeah, and Art liked it too, without knowing that there was any personal relation at all.
Exactly, without bias.
Without bias.
Yeah. All right. Without putting it off anymore, I think we should talk about the best movies we saw at TIFF. Since Amanda, you have Chase's number 2 at number 1, I think maybe we should go to Chase's number 1 first.
Yeah, because I think Chase's number 1 is my number 5.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
I don't think Zach saw this movie, even though it was the one movie I decided to see twice. So I went into this movie excited, but kind of just like, I'm expecting a pretty fun movie. But I was very surprised that my favorite film of TIFF 2024 was Scott Beck and Brian Woods' Heretic, which is the new A24 horror movie / thriller / other things. It's like, I want to talk about everything in this movie, but I do think this is one of those movies you want to go in as blind as humanly possible. I feel like there's one movie I really want to compare it to, but even comparing it to that, I feel like I spoil
it gives you a vibe
amount of the movie.
It gives you a vibe, yeah.
It does. If you're into that's the thing, it's tough. So it's A24 horror, so you know it's going to be something different. It's their probably most mainstream feeling type of horror movie, though. Don't expect a Hereditary or anything like that. This is
more on it's more on the talk to me scale, but not as visceral. It's just more, it's very accessible, but it's still very, very solid.
For sure. It is the most basic premise is Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East play these two Mormon missionaries that are just trying to spread the word of Jesus Christ, and Hugh Grant reaches out for them to come to his house and try and convert him to their religion. And that is pretty much the basis of the movie, and it goes into a lot more on the topic for sure for the next, I don't know, 90-ish minutes. I'm actually looking at the runtime. It says 110 minutes. I can't believe that. This feels like this feels like a 90-minute max movie.
Yeah.
I love a movie. So usually a movie like this is very easy for it to fall on my list, but I just think Heretic does such a damn good job at executing exactly what it goes for. It almost makes me wonder if these two guys got screwed on 65, which I heard they kind of did, because
You
I
gotta
did
think.
not like that movie at all. But this Hugh Grant, first of all, is incredible. I know we talked about Demi Moore maybe getting no shot at an Oscar nom, but in a world where we all want it to happen, I think Hugh Grant is just as deserving in that conversation. I think he's phenomenal in the role that he gives. The reason, this is one you have to talk spoilers after you see it, because I just feel like talking about any of it spoils part of the fun. Like, I think part of the fun is genuinely having no idea where the movie goes next, and it does such a good job at escalate, kind of like how I was comparing it to the Shadow Strays, where each action scene just gets better. Heretic, each new development in the thing just goes like, where the fuck is this possibly going? And I love movies like that. I think go for it, Zach.
No, sorry, just based on the vibes and the way that it was kind of like a late night premiere and stuff, I feel like I was anticipating this being just more of like a traditional horror. But I think the thing that I was most surprised by in just hearing all of your reaction to it is how engaged you were with it, just on like on like an intellectual level.
Yeah, I think the worst thing you could say about this movie is that it probably both sides it a little bit too much. Which I get that they're not trying to disrespect anybody. I do have, like, there's just issues with what certain religions choose to do that make them more than just kind of like, if it makes you happy, that's good. And I'm like, not to cause controversy, there's a lot of stuff in Mormonism that either in the past or present have been issues. They've been called out for weird purity testing and weird like interviews that they do with underage kids. All sorts of stuff. So it kind of feels weird to come out the other
religion
end.
Is weird.
Yeah. So it's just it does both sides it a little bit, but it's just very compelling, and it will probably at least make you think of things that you might not have before. And I love how they handled one of the characters in particular. Again, I'm not trying to spoil anything, but it's just it does a really good job with what it's doing. It knows what it's doing. It knows what the audience is expecting, and it actually does a really good job like subverting a lot of it as you're going through. So I had a ton of fun. I think it's going to play very well in theaters. I think it's going to be a good time.
And I will say, I know I said I saw this movie twice, but the reason was I had a gap. And this,
you had a gap.
When there's certain movies you want to know immediately, like, is this going to work as good the second time? Because I felt like, am I just loving this movie so much because the whole first time I had no clue where it was going? So I really wanted, if there was a movie I wanted to see again, it was this, just to see, does it still hold up when you know exactly what's coming? And for me, it absolutely did. I think there's little things even in, honestly, my biggest complaint was the opening conversation. And once you see the movie, you're like, holy shit, no, that makes sense. So much sense why they like, even this corny kind of thing is here. Like, I love a well-crafted horror movie. It's not, it's not the movie that diehard horror fans are going to say is the best horror movie of the year. In a way, it's not exactly like Longlegs, but it's a horror movie. Like when you talk about a movie like Longlegs, where it's not really a horror movie, it's a different kind of experience. I think Heretic definitely fits in that. It's my favorite horror movie of the year for sure. And I can't wait to watch it a third time. I'm excited to take my girlfriend, my friends. It's a fun ride.
It's sick.
Yeah,
So
I mean, look,
highly recommend it.
Even if it like just worked perfectly in your schedule, just that you had the motivation to go see it twice at the same festival speaks volumes to how good this movie hopefully will be for most people.
For sure.
Yeah. So Heretic, a solid pick at number 1. Amanda, let's hear about your number 1, which was also Chase's number 2.
My number 1 was Anora. This was another one that I didn't know anything about it going into the screening. I knew that it got great reviews out of Cannes, and that's all I needed to know. I had no idea what the plot was. So when they were kind of doing the intro, and I was like, oh, that's what it's about. And it just blew me away. It's this very, I don't even know. I feel like we should maybe do the premise a little bit. I guess loose
A little
premise
bit.
doesn't really. It's basically she works at a strip club, and a young Russian boy comes in with a lot of money to spend, who takes a liking to her because she speaks Russian and understands it, and is basically like, be my girlfriend for a little bit. I'm going to pay you money to come hang out with me and do other things with me outside of work. And she's just having fun. And there's just this like kind of like Saturday Night, there's just this energy to the whole movie, but like especially that first half has this like great fun atmospheric energy, and you're just kind of waiting for like, okay, well, where's it going to go? How are we going to get there? Because it eventually kind of hits the point where he's probably not supposed to be doing a lot of the things that he's doing. And because he's so rich, it's because his father is a very respected person, and his mother takes that the matriarch position of maintaining that image very seriously. So it just turns into this chaotic mess of all these people that live in America that are kind of supposed to be his handlers, trying to get control of the situation. And it just never stops. I think one of my favorite things about the movie that I've talked with other people is that you'll have conversations crisscrossing, people talking over each other. It feels so realistic because if you're fighting, you're not waiting for someone to finish their thought before you cut in. If you disagree with something, you are coming in hard being like, no, fuck you. And like there's scenes where like one person's yelling at this person behind a counter, and then they switch. And some of it's in Russian, some of it's in English, but it flows really well. Like that almost sounds confusing, but it really was not difficult to follow the subtitles and the English language kind of going back and forth in a kinetic way. I was just really, really enamored with this. And it ends with like such a good emotional gut punch. Like she goes through a very sincere and interesting character arc in a way that, you know, you don't usually see from, you know, male writers and directors necessarily, like not to like throw that out there, but it's interesting to me that Sean Baker was able to write this character. No shade. I don't think anybody's more or less qualified, but you know, the movies we're seeing that are dealing with just how women use different things for power or lack power have been really strong this year from female creators. And this is kind of, in my opinion, like an outlier from someone who's not necessarily done this side of it. But I find sometimes some movies use sex too much, but everything in this movie feels like it works and needs to happen. And it flows well. Like none of it felt awkward. None of it felt like they were just putting it in there to get, you know, half naked shots of Mikey Madison or anything. Everything felt like it had intention and purpose and was required so that you could get to that point in the end and have that like final scene hit as hard as it does. I think, so Chase, what did you think? I know you like the first half more than the second, but
I again, keeping it as spoiler free as possible. The first half of Anora, I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is definitely my favorite movie of the year. It's you mentioned the energy of Saturday Night, but I think almost, even though Saturday Night has energy, almost does a disservice to Anora.
I know, because it's so much.
Anora
it's so much. It's, you just got to imagine it's this like rich gamer kid with a bunch of money, ADHD brain, just being like, any thought, we're gonna do it.
I've heard it's like Pretty Woman until it becomes Uncut Gems.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. A little bit. It's definitely easier to watch than Uncut Gems, and I like it more than Uncut Gems. I feel like you're not as frustrated with, like, you're never frustrated with Anora in the way that, or Annie, the way you are with Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems. Like most of Uncut Gems is just being like, why? And this is more like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, you say that she's like a really three-dimensional character, and I feel like that's a thing that Sean Baker has done really well, is particularly when you talk about these stories involving sex workers. It's like he has this real fascination for exploring them beyond just the surface level of their jobs or the of what you would expect from these kinds of characters. They always end up being really vivid, full depictions of these people, and it's really exciting to hear that Mikey Madison gets this part and apparently is like really incredible in it.
I think she's the best performance of the year.
It's up there. It's up there. Like, we're talking about accent work. I get that it's a little bit different when it's something that's in America, but she's like really nailing that like hostile, like, no, fuck you, fuck you. Like, it's no, it was really, really good. I hoped I was gonna like it, but it was one of the ones that for me, like, it matched the hype going into the movie, which is always nice. Because I think everyone's and tough, because a lot of the times things, you get a little bit swept up in certain things and then you're like, oh, it was a little disappointing. This, like, it delivered. It delivered.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think Sean Baker for me. At first I wasn't super into him. Like I didn't get the Florida Project at first, the first viewing, and then I end up moving 5 minutes away from the real Florida Project, and I live out here. I rewatched the movie, and I definitely gained more appreciative for how he shoots a movie, how he casts like people that feel like real people. Even if you see Willem Dafoe, like he doesn't necessarily feel like Willem Dafoe.
Right.
I think Anora is his best movie. I really do. The more I sit on it, my initial reaction, I walked out, was like very good, tiny disappointed by the second half. But it's like if the first half is a 10, the second half is probably like a 7.5 or an 8. Like it's still a great movie. You know what I mean? There's just certain people in the first half that I missed in the second half, and there's certain people in the second half that are still really good. But I just feel like there are a lot of characters that come in and out, and they're all great for different reasons. But Sean Baker said he got the inspiration of the movie for the second half of the movie. So maybe on a second viewing, I like the second half even more.
I like it a lot. There's a lot of good dynamic with the goons that are more than goons. Like Igor is one of the best characters of the year, I think, too. I don't know. It's fun. Like when Buddy, I don't know. There's just so many good moments. It's just, I don't know. I like it a lot. It's really good. And it never goes in the direction, because like it's a bunch of Russian people. So you're kind of like, oh God, is it just going to go like Russian mobsters with guns? And it's like, no, it never gets there. It feels so interesting that they're just kind of like, what do you want us to do though? Like legally, what do you want us to do in this situation? And that makes for a very fun section of a movie, which is apparently it's like, there's like one scene in this movie that feels so fast, but apparently it's 28 minutes long.
I couldn't believe that when they said
I know.
that. I was like, that was 28 minutes. Holy shit.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
know. It's so good.
Yeah.
So Chase said it's his favorite Sean Baker movie. Amanda, I think you also told me that that's probably your favorite Sean Baker movie.
I would say.
Do we know what Michael thinks? Sean
Michael's
Baker's buddy?
I think Michael still liked Red Rocket more.
He definitely likes Red Rocket more, but he was pretty high on Anora. I think there was a couple movies he liked more than Anora at
interesting.
TIFF, but
I know
it
he was really
definitely
hyped coming out of the screening.
Top 4. Yeah, but
he was hyped out of the screening.
And I will say, I feel like in a way, even though there's a ton of sex in it, I feel like this is Sean Baker's most accessible movie. Like I don't think everyone would instantly connect with the Florida Project or even Red Rocket. But even though Red Rocket and Anora don't have exactly the same subject matter, but they got 2 sex-related workers, like I feel like Anora is his most accessible movie. It's his funniest movie.
Yeah.
I think you could argue it's his most emotional movie. And I think
it does everything.
Yeah. It's a banger of a movie that I can't wait to watch again.
I
think I'm gonna like it more on the second watch.
Yeah, sure. I didn't stress it enough, but it is so funny. Like that screening, it was like almost nonstop laughter the entire time. Like it was up there. It was really up there. Like very, very, very funny.
Nice. I'm so looking forward to my screening of Anora. I catch it on the 23rd. I've only got a couple more days to wait.
Sweet.
But you guys got me really hyped for it. A lot of movies to get hyped for that we talked about out of this Toronto International Film Festival that will be coming out over the course of the next few months. So be sure to check in and see as we talk about these movies in more detail and maybe get into some spoilery details that we don't want to do before y'all even know when you can see these movies. But really always a pleasure to talk about the movies we love with both of you. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Chase, for hopping on another Intercut podcast.
Thank you,
down
Zach,
TIFF with me. Of course, anytime. Chase, where can people find more from you?
You can find me at my name right there on YouTube, Letterboxd, Twitter, mostly on YouTube. Again, I talked about my top 10 here, but I plan on dropping a full video of all 37 movies that I saw at the festival, go into as non-spoiler as I can, and then just going into details on some of the bigger ones like Heretic, Anora, The Brutalist. Like definitely want to get as much as my raw thoughts on them as possible, and then I'll probably revisit some of those when they come out, when you guys could all see them, because I was in your position for a while too. I would hear about all these great movies that I couldn't see for months at a time. So super thankful to go to TIFF for the first time. Can't wait to go back. It is expensive, don't get me wrong, but it's worth saving up some money if you're if you're listening to a podcast like this. You got to go at least once. It's an awesome time.
Yeah. If you're 2.5 hours deep onto a TIFF recap, you probably should make the trip to Toronto. Thanks again, Chase. Amanda, where can people find more from you?
You can find me at Amanda the Jedi right there, all over the place. Letterboxd, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch sometimes, but mostly YouTube. Much like Chase, expect at some point a video of all the movies I saw, with a little bit more focus on some of those highlights, and then some specific videos on things as we get either into their theatrical release date or VOD release date on the channel. There was a lot I saw this year that I know are going to be primed for good videos. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we better be getting a substance video. I'm
We
sure you got a lot to say about
are.
it.
Yes.
Nice, nice. Are you wearing the Pump It Up video?
I
Headband for
will.
all of it or just some of it?
It depends how warm it is.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Amanda. You can find more from me across social media at ZShevich. There we go. Or at Multiplex Show, wherever you find videos. I'll also be doing some coverage of the movies that we caught in Toronto. So be sure to keep it locked in, not just there, but here on Intercut, where we will continue talking about movies every week on Weekend Must Watch, along with a bunch of other videos as we get going. Shout out to all our patrons who continue to support the show on the Academy level. They are Tushar, Cademan, Connor, Josh, May, Ricky, Joe, Wiley, Benji, Matt, Jeremy, and Michael, I guess. And then in the producer tier, we got Toon and Brandon G. Also, Josh, I gotta upgrade Josh in my graphic. Thank you for your contribution, everybody's contribution, and a reminder that you can support this show by heading over to patreon.com/intercutpod and signing up for a membership where you will get access to some episodes early, access to our monthly video chats, which are happening. This one is happening on the 30th. Whole bunch of cool stuff you can find over at patreon.com/intercutpod, or just by clicking the join button right here on YouTube to support the show. You can also continue to follow Intercut Pod at Intercut Pod across social media for updates throughout the week from Amanda, from Chase, from Arturo, from me, from everybody that we feature here on this podcast. And also make sure to click the link to our Discord to keep the conversation going throughout the week. It's a fun place to hang out and chat about movies. But that's about all for this edition of Intercut. And until next time, Ryan Reynolds isn't a movie. He's just a guy.
It's not a movie. That's a guy.
That's a guy.